Chapter 101. Isn't it, Sirius? The feeling of a Dementor's kiss is unimaginable. Everyone says this scene is unbearable to watch, but I still decided to try to watch it to the end. Severus, please don't do this. Lupin couldn't help but speak up to persuade. Harry, you go out first. However, Snape ignored Lupin, didn't even look back, just turned around coldly and ordered Harry to leave. Faced with Snape's cold attitude and commanding tone, Harry obviously did not intend to obey. He drew his wand without hesitation, pointed it directly at Snape, and shouted loudly, "Expelliarmus!" Instantly, the tip of the wand emitted a dazzling light, and it flew straight towards Snape like a meteor. The powerful impact caused Snape to be thrown 2 or 3 meters away. With a loud bang, he hit the wooden wall next to him, causing a lot of the wall to collapse and fall to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. "Oh my God, Harry, how dare you attack the professor?" Lupin's face was filled with astonishment and disbelief. The time they had spent together during this period of time had made him mistakenly believe that Harry had a gentle and modest personality, but he never expected that he could be so resolute and courageous. "That's not important, Professor Lupin. Right now, I just want to find out what happened to Pettigrew." Harry's eyes were firm and sharp, as if burning with fire, and his voice was also resolute. "Because this is about the truth behind my parents' tragic death." Lupin sighed and found a seat to sit down. "Peter Pettigrew, they were our former classmates. Who could have thought that we would end up like this?" Lupin said this in a heavy tone, as if recalling some unpleasant past events. "Everyone thought he had died, but the truth is not so." He paused and continued. "Just yesterday at noon, Thomas came to me out of the blue and handed us this thing." As he spoke, Lupin pulled out a tattered, wrinkled ancient map from his arms. Harry leaned forward with a suspicious look on his face and asked curiously, "What on earth is this?" "This is the Marauder's map, a mysterious alchemical artifact," Lupin explained with a serious look on his face. "It has magical power and can clearly show the name of every living being in Hogwarts. However, when I unfolded this map yesterday, I was surprised to find the name of Peter Pettigrew, and the location was actually in your dormitory." Lupin's words were like a thunderbolt, shocking Harry. "What? In my dorm?" Harry's eyes widened and he exclaimed in disbelief. "It is absolutely true. The mouse that has been hiding next to Ronald is Peter Pettigrew, disguised as Scabbers." There was a firm gleam in Lupin's eyes, as if he wanted to sear this shocking fact into Harry's mind. "Harry, did Ronald ever tell you how long his pet lived?" Lupin suddenly changed the subject and asked a seemingly irrelevant question. I think Ronald mentioned that Banban has been with him since he can remember. So that's about 12 years. Harry answered uncertainly, trying to recall his previous conversation with Ronald. "Well, Harry, you have lived in the Muggle world for so long that you should know that the lifespan of an ordinary mouse is usually only 1 to 3 years. Lupin sighed softly and continued with a tone full of emotion. "If you think about it, what kind of mouse can survive for 12 years? It's just unbelievable." At this moment, Lupin suddenly changed the subject. "And if you don't believe me, you can ask Ronald if any of his pet rats have ever been missing a finger. After all, when we finally found Peter Pettigrew, he had already disappeared without a trace, leaving only a small piece of the finger." At this point, Lupin couldn't help but sigh again. "That's why we always thought he met with an accident." Lupin shook his head regretfully. Sirius' face was full of anger and he shouted indignantly. "That coward! He actually cut off one of his fingers to fake his death and successfully fooled everyone. You know, Sirius was framed and bear the stigma, and he was also tortured and abused by the Dementors in Azkaban for 12 years. It is understandable that he is so angry after learning the truth. So what should I do now?" Harry asked anxiously. "Humph, I knew you would ask that, Harry Potter. Don't worry, the adults have already arranged everything for you." Theodore pulled Ronald, whose body was trembling, and jumped down lightly from above. Harry was completely numb watching this scene. He originally thought he was just going to meet Sirius, then Professor Lupin suddenly appeared, followed by Snape. Now even Theodore and Ronald are here. Where is the concealment we agreed on? Come over to have a party, right? Banban in Ronald's arms kept twisting violently, trying to break free from Ronald's arms and escape from here. But Theodore didn't give him a chance. He reached out and snatched the scar from Ronald's hand and threw it heavily to the ground. He took out his wand and shouted, "Avada Kedavra!" Emerald green light emerged from the tip of Theodore's staff and hit the spots on the ground directly. No, are children taught in such a wild way in Hogwarts nowadays? Raise your hand and you will see Avada Ken. Lupin and Sirius looked at each other, and both saw the confusion in each other's eyes. The sleeping Banban on the ground suddenly twisted his fat body quickly and moved left and right. Successfully avoided the fatal killing curse. He knew that Sirius and Lupin were both here, and he was most likely exposed. Escape. You must escape. Scabbers quickly stretched out his front legs and started running quickly, but unfortunately Sirius had already noticed this and kicked Scabbers hard, sending him flying. The flying Banban changed in a flash of light and finally turned into a fat middle-aged man with a bald head, buck teeth, and a long nose, which stunned Ronald, who was standing beside him. When Ronald thought about how he had to sleep with Banban in his arms for so many years, and then looked at the ugly man in front of him, he suddenly got goose bumps. Chapter 102. After Peter Pettigrew turned back into human form, he knew there was no hope of escape, so he resorted to a self-torture tactic. Oh, Sirius, Remus John, my old friends, I miss you so much. Sirius's eyes widened with anger and he responded viciously. Humph, don't give me that, Pettigrew. I wish I could skin you alive every day. Lupin, who was always gentle and polite standing aside, now had a gloomy expression on his face, and was obviously full of hostility towards Pettigrew. Seeing that his plan failed, Pettigrew turned his attention to Harry. Oh, Harry, you look exactly like your father James. We were good friends back then. After saying that, Pettigrew tried to move towards Harry while pretending to be close to him. Get away from me, you filthy rat. Who are you to talk to Harry? Sirius saw this, roared, pushed Pettigrew away, and stood in front of Harry to protect him. You still have the nerve to mention James. Lupin could no longer bear it, so he quickly pulled out his wand, pointed it directly at Pettigrew, and shouted angrily. It is because of you, a despicable traitor, that James and Lily died tragically at the hands of Voldemort. You deserve to die. I'm just too scared. I really didn't mean it. Pettigrew said with a sad face. Who could have imagined what kind of horrible weapon that abominable Dark Lord holds in his hands? He continued to defend himself. Sirius, you hate me so much. Well, then tell me, if you were in that situation, what choice would you make? Pettigrew suddenly raised his voice and shouted at Sirius. Humph, I would rather sacrifice my life than betray my friends, and you are a complete despicable villain and shameless person. Sirius cursed angrily. He never expected that the disgusting and smelly rat in front of him could be so shameless. Hearing this, Harry could no longer suppress his anger and he shouted loudly. Little dwarf, Dad will never allow you to die easily, because you were once friends, but this does not mean that I will forgive the sins you have committed. Those who do wrong must pay the price. Please, Harry, let me live. Pettigrew begged. Yes, Harry is right. If you do something wrong, you should pay the price. Even if Voldemort doesn't kill you, we will kill you. That's right, Pettigrew should go to the world of the dead and make amends to James and Lily. Sirius and Lupin pointed their wands at Pettigrew without mercy. No, we can't kill him just yet. Harry stopped him quickly. Why, Harry? This man is... Sirius looked at Harry in great confusion. I know very well, let's take him back to the castle first. Harry replied firmly. Thank you for being so generous and kind, Harry. Pettigrew kowtowed repeatedly with tears of gratitude. For him, as long as he could survive, this was better than anything else. We hand him over to the Dementors. This sentence was like a sharp sword, piercing Peter Pettigrew's heart. He opened his eyes wide in horror, struggled desperately, and uttered desperate pleas. No. No, please, Harry, Harry. However, it was too late. At this moment, a spell suddenly struck Pettigrew's body like lightning. In an instant, his mouth, which had been shouting continuously, became stiff, opening and closing, but no sound came out anymore. Several people held Peter Pettigrew tightly and walked towards the castle step by step. The atmosphere was extremely tense, as if every step was full of unknown dangers. Suddenly, Lupin, who was holding the wand, seemed to be hit by an invisible force and fell to his knees. His face was distorted and he screamed in pain, his voice resounding throughout the night sky. Sirius looked up at the rising moon and immediately understood what had happened. Oh no, this is not good. He shouted anxiously. You all get out of here quickly. Before he finished speaking, Lupin's body began to undergo amazing changes. His skeleton expanded rapidly, his muscles tightened, his clothes were torn into pieces, and finally he revealed the hideous face of a werewolf. Sirius tried to control Lupin with magic, but his efforts seemed to be ineffective. The scene before him made him feel extremely frustrated and helpless. At this moment, a calm and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. "What a mess, my dear uncle." Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Theodore bowing to the speaker with a fiery gaze and respectfully addressing him as Sir. The person who came was none other than Thomas. "Stop talking nonsense and come and help me," Sirius yelled loudly. "Uncle, has no one ever told you that you have to use the word please when you want to ask for help? Please help me. Please, hurry up, Thomas," an anxious voice came. "I know. Don't worry. Don't harm this werewolf's life. He is Professor Lupin," Harry shouted. As soon as the words fell, a calm voice was heard. "Kukulkan, use your power to bind it." Then, a dazzling golden light flashed from Thomas's wrist, and instantly turned into a golden giant python with huge wings. This python was so huge and majestic that people couldn't help but be shocked. Kukulkan easily swung his thick tail, and tied up the werewolf Professor Lupin as fast as lightning. This binding technique is one of the hunting methods commonly used by snakes, first trapping the prey, and then gradually applying pressure until the opponent's bones are crushed. However, Kukulkan merely followed Thomas's orders and tied up the werewolf without exerting any further force. The tied-up werewolf showed no fear, and instead had a stronger fierce aura in his eyes. Suddenly, the werewolf opened its bloody and ferocious mouth and fiercely bit Kukulkan. In an instant, two crisp snapping sounds rang out all around. It turned out that the werewolf's two sharp fangs were bitten off. Broken fangs flew out, carrying blood and severe pain, as if telling the cruelty and intensity of this fierce battle. However, despite suffering such heavy damage, the werewolf still refused to surrender. It stared at the enemy in front of it with wide eyes, preparing to launch a new round of attack. But all this was in vain. In front of Kukulkan's hard scales, the werewolf's attack looked more like a tickle. "Thomas, why are you here too?" Chapter 103. "Oh, it's Professor Snape. Why aren't you asleep yet so late? Are you suffering from insomnia like me, so you came out to relax and get some fresh air?" Thomas said this as a matter of course, looking up and down at Professor Snape, who looked a little embarrassed, with a slightly playful look in his eyes. Hearing this, Snape's face instantly became extremely gloomy. He glared at Thomas fiercely, then waved his black robe vigorously, indicating that he did not want to continue to tangle with Thomas. Then, he turned his attention to Harry and Ronald who were standing nearby. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, I really doubt what is inside your giant heads like trolls. Could it be that the interior of Hogwarts Castle can no longer accommodate the so-called courage of you Gryffindors? So that you dare to risk running outside the castle to carry out such a meaningless night walk behavior?" Snape scolded mercilessly. After saying this, Snape seemed to feel a little relieved. As for deducting points from Slytherin House, humph, that's simply a fantasy. If Thomas hadn't just talked back to him, making him feel a little unhappy, he would have even wanted to take this opportunity to give Slytherin House a full 50 points. Harry's face looked extremely ugly, but there was nothing he could do. After all, he was caught for night wandering this time, and the points deduction was justified. As for Thomas, he is not just Harry's friend, but also his benefactor. If it weren't for Thomas, Harry would never have known the truth behind his parents' tragic death. And just now, when Professor Lupin unfortunately lost control and turned into a werewolf, it was thanks to Thomas who stepped forward and successfully protected them all. Because of this, how could Harry agree with Snape at this moment and ask Thomas why he also chose to go out at night and betray his friends? However, Ronald was completely different from Harry. When he heard what Snape said, he was immediately furious and completely lost his ability to think rationally, blurting out what he said without thinking. "This is unfair. You are deliberately making things difficult for Gryffindor. Thomas and Nott were also out for a night out. Why are you only deducting points from us?" "You are right, Severus, that is a mistake." Sirius, who was standing nearby, couldn't help but echoed. Snape hadn't responded to everyone's accusations yet, when suddenly, a cold voice rang out. "Arrogant! Who do you think you are, Ronald? Who are you? Who are you, and how dare you compare yourself to an adult?" Theodore said in a cold voice. The tip of the wand in his hand had begun to emit a faint green light. Ronald, who had already lost his mind, was suddenly pulled back to reality by the extreme fear brought by death. The horrific scene when Theodore cast the killing curse in the horror house still appeared clearly in front of his eyes, as if it had just happened. He was so young, and his beautiful life had not yet begun. How could he be willing to die so early? Okay, guys, now let's focus on the key issues. Thomas spoke calmly. It was late at night and they couldn't just stand there. If the students witnessed everything, it would probably cause quite a commotion and trouble. As if awakened from a dream, everyone turned their attention to Lupin, who was controlled by Kukulkan and turned into a werewolf. Let's drag him into the Forbidden Forest first. Snape's voice was cold and emotionless. Everyone looked at each other and finally accepted the suggestion silently. The next moment, Kukulkan flapped his wings suddenly, creating a violent whirlwind that swept Lupin towards the Forbidden Forest. The others turned and walked towards Hogwarts, only Sirius stayed there alone, and finally walked silently towards the direction of the House of Horrors. The lights in the Slytherin common room were dim. Thomas sat quietly on the sofa, staring straight ahead, as if he was the only one left in the world. His fingers kept tapping on the table, making a crisp and rhythmic sound, as if this small movement could help him sort out his thoughts. The time for the uprising was supposed to be after graduation from 7th grade, but at this moment Thomas had another idea in his mind. Recently, the mysterious Chamber of Secrets often appeared in his dreams, and the dialogue between him and his future self and the deceased Nicholas Flamel also flashed repeatedly. As for the Sky Throne and the curse of the Goblin Lord, he felt that time was running out and he could no longer waste his energy on those childish and ridiculous games in Hogwarts as before. Thomas knew very well that in order to cope with the upcoming crisis, he must complete the tasks set by the system as soon as possible and gain more powerful power. However, achieving this goal is not easy. Although there are many ways to achieve this goal, whether it is convincing admiration or terrifying fear, no matter which path you choose, the final result is the same, gaining recognition from others. In this turbulent time, Thomas secretly made up his mind to go all out to pursue the supreme power in order to cope with the unknown challenges of the future. He knew that this road was rugged and full of dangers, but he was not afraid, because only in this way could he protect everything he cherished. He used the power of the Black and Malfoy families to arrange for the Hogwarts graduates from the previous 2 years to work in various departments of the Ministry of Magic. Although they were all just entering this field, this action still allowed him to obtain a lot of useful information. Although the Ministry of Magic in England seems to be prosperous on the surface, there are various factions fighting openly and covertly within it. On one side is the weak and incompetent Fudge, and on the other side is Old Batty, who is eyeing power. This situation has actually become riddled with holes and leaks everywhere. However, for Thomas, this is undoubtedly a great opportunity. However, relying on fear alone to maintain rule is obviously not sustainable. So why not try other methods? For example, create a hero who saves the English wizarding world. Since there is a hero, there must be a demon king to fight against him. That is why Thomas showed up at that place tonight and acquiesced to Pettigrew's escape. You know, if Thomas didn't do it on purpose, how could Pettigrew, with his mouse-like skills, slip away from Thomas's nose? Thomas hopes that Pettigrew can successfully resurrect Voldemort, and he now needs all the plots to develop according to the original story. It's all in the service of a higher purpose, the greater good. Chapter 104. The next morning, the sun shone through the curtains into the room, creating patches of light and shadow. As usual, Minister of Magic Fudge walked into his office with steady steps. He gently opened the curtains, letting the warm sunlight fill the room. Then, Fudge walked to the cupboard nearby and opened the door skillfully. This cupboard was where he kept his expensive wines. Although drinking during official hours is strictly prohibited by the Ministry of Magic, such rules do not seem to be very binding for Fudge as a minister. Fudge reached out and took out a bottle of exquisite wine from the cabinet. The fiery red liquid in the bottle was surging like a burning flame. This was the famous fire whiskey in the wizarding world. This wine is expensive. One bottle is equivalent to the living expenses of an ordinary wizard for 2 or 3 months. You can imagine how precious it is. Fudge carefully unscrewed the cap and poured the crimson liquor into his glass. Just as he was about to sit down and enjoy this beautiful day, an owl with snow-white feathers suddenly flew into the window and landed steadily on his desk, holding a letter as white as snow in its mouth. After dropping the letter, the owl quickly flapped its broad wings and flew away like lightning. Faced with such a situation, Fudge seemed very calm and did not seem to take it to heart. You know, as the Minister of Magic, he receives a lot of similar letters every day. The contents of these letters are varied, nothing more than some flattering words or accusations and abuses for his inaction. Fudge was accustomed to this. Just as he was about to throw the letter into the trash can, he suddenly stopped. It turned out that what caught his attention was the eye-catching badge on the envelope. This was the unique family emblem of the Black family. As the Minister of Magic, Fudge was naturally very familiar with the family crests used by the noble families in his country, not to mention the famous and prestigious families like the Black family. As we all know, Sirius has been expelled from the Black family, and Narcissa has now changed her surname to Malfoy. In this way, it does not take much thought to infer the true identity of the owner of this letter. Thomas Blake. Why would this famous figure in the international wizarding world send such a letter to me? The reason is really puzzling. Insults? That's impossible. After all, there is no hatred between him and the heir of the Black family. As for compliments, there is no need to consider it, because Thomas's reputation is much more famous than his own as the Minister of Magic of England. What was the reason? Driven by strong curiosity, Fudge carefully tore open the envelope. The content of the letter was very concise and its core request was for the Ministry of Magic to stop investigating Sirius because the real murderer was someone else. Moreover, the real murderer of Mrs. Potter has now been identified, and it is Peter Pettigrew who left behind a severed finger and disappeared mysteriously. Looking at the dense signatures at the bottom of the letter, Fudge couldn't help but feel his scalp tingling. There were at least 18 of the sacred 28 family crests alone, and countless other minor noble families, with even Dumbledore's own signature on the list. Damn it! Isn't this a blatant attempt to force the Emperor to abdicate? In fact, Thomas wrote this letter just to tell Fudge, this is what I mean. You can do whatever you want. In fact, this is true. The English wizarding community has long been accustomed to this chaotic life. As long as Thomas showed the slightest sign of wanting to become the Minister of Magic, then if nothing unexpected happened, Fudge might face the fate of being expelled from office by the nobles the next moment. The next morning, Thomas, a third-year student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, might be able to achieve a dramatic change in his life and become the new Minister of Magic of England. Moreover, this change will not cause any dissatisfaction or complaints among the people. After all, in the eyes of most wizards, no matter who holds this position, even if it is just to tie a dog in the minister's office, his role will probably be far better than that of the incompetent Fudge. No. We can't let this happen. Fudge roared angrily, his eyes wide open, his face flushed red, and the veins on his forehead bulged as if they were about to burst. He clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging deep into his palms, and the anger in his heart erupted like a volcano. I am the Minister of Magic. He continued to roar, his voice so deafening that the whole room seemed to shake. How dare a little brat humiliate me like this? It's outrageous. With a loud bang, Fudge suddenly raised his hand and overturned the desk in front of him to the ground. The documents, stationery, and the precious glass of fire whiskey on the table fell and shattered. Glass shards flew everywhere and documents were scattered all over the floor, but Fudge didn't care about the loss at all. However, this was just the beginning. Like a wild animal out of control, he angrily pounced on other objects in the office. The folders were torn into pieces, the books on the bookshelf were thrown all over the floor, and even the portraits hanging on the wall were not spared, as they were ripped off and torn by him. The secretary who had walked into the office to report to Fudge was stunned by the scene before her. She stood there blankly, at a loss. Are you all right, Minister Fudge? After a long while, the secretary came back to his senses and asked tremblingly. What can I do? Fudge gasped and glared at the secretary fiercely, his eyes full of anger and unwillingness. Then, calming himself down a little, he gave the order. Now, you will immediately tell those Aurors to stop their pursuit of Sirius Black. And publicly announce that the real criminal is Peter Pettigrew. Fudge added through gritted teeth. This. The secretary hesitated, looking a little embarrassed. What are you still standing there for? Go now. Fudge roared again, and his voice exploded like thunder in the secretary's ears. Yes, as you command, Minister Fudge. The secretary was so frightened that he trembled all over and turned around and left in a hurry. Chapter 105. Soon, the news that Sirius Black was wrongly wronged and that Peter Pettigrew was the real murderer of the Potter couple was all over the headlines of the Daily Prophet. Once this matter was exposed, it was like a stone that caused 1,000 waves, and the entire wizarding world was shocked. For a time, Fudge's bad reputation for being extremely stupid and doing nothing spread quickly like wildfire throughout the streets and alleys, becoming a hot topic among wizards after dinner. At this moment, Fudge, who was sitting in his office, had a terribly gloomy face. He stared at the Daily Prophet in his hand, trembling with anger. In a rage, he smashed the office he had just cleaned up again. At the same time, the group of Aurors that had densely surrounded the gate of Hogwarts also began to retreat. However, during their evacuation, someone was suddenly surprised to find that the number of Dementors at the scene seemed a little wrong. After a careful count, everyone was shocked to realize that these terrifying dark creatures had inexplicably decreased in number, and the number had decreased by far more than 2/3. This shocking discovery terrified the Aurors who were stationed at the school gate. You know, Dementors are notoriously cruel and brutal, and they have no sympathy for humans. Usually, they only use these terrible creatures to punish wizards who have committed heinous crimes. If the Dementors were allowed to escape into the wizarding world or the Muggle world, it would bring great disaster to both worlds, and this would definitely be a serious dereliction of duty for the Aurors. At that time, all Aurors present will face severe accountability and punishment. Just when the Aurors were getting anxious and worried, Professor Dumbledore appeared in front of everyone again like a savior and told everyone. It turned out that the Dementors had triggered the Hogwarts defense array, and most of them had been destroyed, so there was no need to worry too much. Hearing this, the Aurors, who had been uneasy just now, finally breathed a sigh of relief, and their hearts, which had been hanging for a long time, fell back into their stomachs. At this moment, outside the Hogwarts castle, Sirius had long since shed his previous decadent and miserable appearance. After a careful grooming and dressing, his face was much neater, and his complexion was rosier and healthier than before. Wearing a heroic windbreaker with exquisite and small leather boots, he looked quite energetic and imposing. Sirius' slightly red eyes became moist and he greedily took a deep breath of fresh air, as if he wanted to make up for what he had missed in Azkaban in the past 12 years. For 12 whole years. He had been carrying the false charge of killing his best brother and his wife. Now, he had gone through untold hardships to escape from that terrible place, but he had suffered countless cold stares and humiliation. However, today, all the grievances were finally redressed. Oh, what's the matter? Are you so moved that you're about to cry, my dear uncle? Thomas looked at the man in front of him with slightly red eyes and spoke with a teasing smile on his face. How on earth did you do it? You actually made the Ministry of Magic? Sirius asked with a slightly trembling voice and disbelief in his eyes. Let the Ministry of Magic stop hunting me down and arresting me? I say, you wrote a letter to their minister, do you believe it? Thomas replied lightly. Is it that simple? Sirius' eyes widened and he asked back suspiciously. Otherwise, I suggest that when you get out, you can ask more about my name, my dear uncle. Thomas said calmly. Why, you have a famous name. Sirius raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. That's right. Thomas nodded and said casually. Well, the heir of the Black family is indeed good. Sirius saw this and spoke to himself. As the only heir to the Black family, one of the 28 sacred families, this title is indeed quite impressive. However, in his heart, no matter how powerful Thomas was, he was no more than this. After all, people with such a prominent status often bear huge responsibilities and pressures. Thinking of this, Sirius couldn't help but sigh secretly that this child seemed to be calm on the surface, but in fact he might not be so relaxed. Perhaps, he paid a considerable price in order to make Fudge and those pure-blood families withdraw their accusations against him, perhaps it was a lot of money, or perhaps it was suffering countless cold stares and ridicules. Looking at Thomas in front of him, Sirius secretly made up his mind to treat his nephew well in the future. At this moment, Thomas obviously saw through the stupid conjecture in his mind, and a look of disdain appeared on his face, sneering, heir to the Black family? Humph, this is just the most insignificant of my many titles. What? The most inconspicuous one? Sirius' eyes widened in disbelief. Of course, my dear uncle, you can also call me the successor of the saints, the godson of the White Lord, or the leader of the Holy Alliance. Thomas said this calmly with a smile on his face, but the amount of information contained in it shocked Sirius. Saint? Is he the saint in the legend? And the godson of the White Lord? Dumbledore actually accepted you as his godson? Even the position of leader of the Holy Alliance belongs to you. Sirius' eyes widened, and he shook his head in disbelief, his voice involuntarily rising an octave. The significance of these titles was so great that Sirius could not accept it for a while. The title of Saint was well known at that time and swept the entire wizarding world. Almost every wizard is familiar with this name, and many old wizards were once members of this organization. After all, this organization was founded by the first Dark Lord himself. The White Lord, Dumbledore, is feared by all with his powerful strength. In the entire wizarding world, he is invincible and no one dares to compete with him. In addition, he has no children, which means that in 100 years, his huge Order of the Phoenix and his family's huge wealth will probably be swallowed up by those greedy goblins. However, the situation is different now. As Dumbledore's godson, Thomas will have the right to inherit all of this. The Holy Alliance has another name, the 28 Holy Families. If one wants to become the leader of the Alliance, one must get the support of at least half of the families. Chapter 106. With Sirius's departure, Hogwarts remained as quiet as before, as if nothing had ever happened. Time flies, the years are peaceful, and this school year has passed quickly. Shortly after the end of the school year, Thomas unexpectedly received an invitation to a dinner party hosted by the Malfoy family. This banquet was grand in scale, and many noble wizards in England were invited to attend. It was very famous. As the leader of the Holy Alliance, Thomas decided to attend the dinner without hesitation. "Cousin, my father asked me to give this to you." Just as Thomas was thinking about the dinner, Malfoy suddenly appeared at the door of the room, holding a letter in his hand and speaking solemnly. Thomas nodded slightly in response, then reached out to take the letter from Malfoy and opened it to read it carefully. As expected, Pettigrew did not disappoint his expectations. Voldemort had been resurrected and began to recall his former subordinates. The organizer who was responsible for gathering the conveners this time was none other than Lucius Malfoy. Not only that, almost all the pureblood families who had already joined Thomas received this mysterious notification letter. "It looks like the show is about to begin." A deep voice echoed in the silent night sky. Late at night, the lights in front of Malfoy Manor were bright, and countless luxuriously decorated carriages were parked neatly there. Each carriage is engraved with a unique family crest, which symbolizes the different families they belong to. The wizards in gorgeous costumes stood solemnly and quietly at the door of the manor, staring at the inky black night sky, as if they were looking forward to the arrival of some important moment. Suddenly, a deafening roar broke the silence of the night sky. Everyone looked up and saw a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up at the end of the distant sky. As the golden light got closer and closer, people finally saw its true face. It turned out to be an extremely huge snake monster. It flapped its huge wings and rushed towards the gate of the manor at an astonishing speed. Behind the basilisk, there was a tightly connected carriage that was completely black and covered with gold patterns. There was a striking family crest hanging above the carriage, and its meaning was self-evident, the Black family. There was no doubt that this mysterious visitor was the legendary master. Seeing this scene, many pureblood wizards couldn't help but feel an indescribable excitement in their hearts. The invitation from the Dark Lord was like a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads, making them nervous all day. Now that the Lord has come in person, they are both excited and terrified, not knowing what fate they will face next. Some people prayed secretly, hoping to get the protection of that adult, while others were worried that they would become the targets of liquidation. However, no matter what they felt in their hearts, they could only stand there silently, waiting for what was about to happen. With a creaky sound, the car door slowly opened, and then 4 men and women walked out of the car. They were 3 men and 1 woman. The young man in the lead was wearing a jet black suit that was well cut and had smooth lines that perfectly outlined his slender figure. A bright red scarf was hanging on his chest, like a burning flame, adding a touch of brightness to the entire look. Although this young man looks young, the powerful aura he emanates makes people feel awe. Each step he took was steady and confident, as if the whole world was under his control. Following closely behind the boy was a beautiful girl, her golden hair shining like the sun and falling softly on her shoulders. The girl was wearing a gorgeous and dazzling purple evening gown. The hem of her skirt swayed gently in the breeze. It was inlaid with dazzling gems, shining like stars, making her look particularly radiant and eye-catching. The other 2 young men following behind them were equally not to be underestimated. They also exuded an extraordinary aura, attracting curious and envious glances from the people around them. There is no doubt that these 4 people are Thomas, Daphne, Malfoy, and Theodore. You know, among the sacred 28 families, the 4 of them actually directly occupied 4 of them. Such a prominent identity and status is really amazing. Many pure-blood nobles dressed in gorgeous clothes and with noble and elegant temperaments hurried forward when they saw Thomas appear, and greeted him with warm smiles on their faces. The guests who came to attend the Malfoy family dinner knew very well that this era was different from the past. Although Voldemort was extremely powerful in the past, he could not defeat the great Professor Albus Dumbledore even at his peak. Now, even if Voldemort was lucky enough to be reborn, he was in an extremely weak state. How could he be expected to cause trouble again? However, Thomas is very different from Voldemort. He is not only young and energetic, but also has a wild and uninhibited charm. More importantly, he had the strong support of Dumbledore and the First Dark Lord. In this way, Thomas was far from being comparable to the struggling Voldemort in terms of strength and background resources. Facing the greetings from the people around him, Thomas just nodded slightly to indicate that he already knew. For people in high positions, they don't need to pay too much attention to the thoughts and ideas of people at the bottom. For Thomas, all he needs is a group of obedient subordinates. If anyone dares to disobey orders or betray him, they will be ruthlessly discarded as useless chess pieces. Uncle. Thomas nodded slightly and spoke softly. His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, just loud enough for people around him to hear, but not too loud to be overly conspicuous. Come on, Thomas, take a seat, we are all waiting for you. Lucius said in a friendly tone with a gentle smile on his face. This simple action of Thomas seemed to be a silent declaration. Lucius Malfoy played an important role in this new alliance. Everyone present here is a seasoned and shrewd person, so they naturally understand the deep meaning of it. They all cast friendly glances at Lucius and took the initiative to come forward to greet him. However, Lucius did not pay much attention to the greetings from other nobles, but just nodded politely. Only when he faced Thomas did he smile, and his attitude was gentle and humble. This obvious difference in treatment made many nobles sigh inwardly. The Malfoy family is still the arrogant Malfoy family after all. No matter how the times change, no matter what difficulties they face, they can always stand firm and always occupy the pinnacle of power. All this is not accidental, but is supported by profound reasons and background. Looking at the scene before them, these nobles felt a complex mix of emotions, envy, jealousy, and helplessness about their own lack of strength. Chapter 107. As Thomas stepped gracefully into the banquet hall, this grand feast for the wizard nobles officially began. The atmosphere at the banquet was extremely lively, with people laughing and toasting each other. The house elves were swiftly carrying delicious food and moving around the spacious hall like lightning. However, the fire whiskey that Fudge cherished so much was as common as drinking water in the Malfoy manor. Thomas, did Draco give you the letter? Of course, Uncle. I have to say that the Malfoy family has always had a unique and accurate vision. Thomas gracefully reached out and took the glass of fire whiskey handed to him by Daphne. After taking a sip, he raised the corners of his mouth slightly and responded with a smile. Thomas's tone was unusually light when he mentioned Voldemort. Uncle, you don't have to worry about Voldemort's situation. He is just a clown. If I hadn't needed to use him temporarily, he probably wouldn't be alive now. To Thomas, it is very simple to eradicate the Dark Lord who is causing trouble in England. There is nothing in this world that cannot be solved by a little Avada. If there is, then he will cast 2 shots. Anyway, with Thomas's current magic power plus the magic power pool in his wand, it is enough for him to cast the killing curse from morning to night without any problem. Lucius sighed softly and slowly lifted his sleeves. A black magic mark suddenly appeared on his wrist. Thomas was shocked when he saw this, and immediately understood Lucius' deep-seated worries. This dark mark is similar to the mysterious and terrifying White Bird blood curse, both of which can control the life and death of the recipient. Not only that, this mark is also regarded as a symbol of the identity of a Death Eater. Anyone who joins the Death Eater camp will have this mark branded on their left arm. In addition to being an identification mark, it also allows the Death Eaters to pass information between each other and maintain close contact with Voldemort. However, the terrifying thing is that once you accept the dark mark, it is like carrying an eternal curse, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot erase it from your body. Even if Voldemort died in the future, the dark mark would still be like a hideous scar, deeply imprinted on his arm, but the color would be slightly lighter. This has undoubtedly become a common concern for many pure-blooded wizards, including Lucius. Although Voldemort is in trouble now, his strength has not yet fully recovered, and he is temporarily unable to control the dark mark, but who can guarantee that he will not make a comeback one day? By then, everyone present here would probably find it difficult to escape his severe punishment and revenge. The wizard nobles present today are all under tremendous pressure. They secretly prayed that Thomas would be able to quickly encourage Dumbledore to take action and kill Voldemort in one fell swoop. If this went against their wishes, they themselves would probably not be able to escape a tragic fate. "Uncle, maybe I have a way to resolve this crisis." Thomas suddenly spoke up. "Really? Thomas?" Lucius's eyes flashed with surprise. To be honest, he had been troubled by this matter for some time, and now that he heard that Thomas had a way to solve it, how could he not be excited? However, at this moment, Voldemort sat on the spacious and magnificent main throne in Little Barty Manor with a gloomy face, as if the whole world was weighing heavily on his heart. Just a short while ago today, Lucius Malfoy, the servant he once regarded as the most loyal and trustworthy, had the audacity to refuse to respond to his communication request. This is simply a blatant provocation and contempt for the authority of this great Dark Lord. What made Voldemort even more angry was that, according to the information obtained by Barty Jr., the dinner party at Malfoy Manor that night was still held as planned, but the role of host, who was originally supposed to be Lucius Malfoy, was inexplicably replaced by a young boy named Thomas Black. Faced with such a change, although Voldemort was extremely angry, his reason told him that he must remain calm and restrained at this moment. Therefore, he specially sent Little Batty to summon his old subordinates who had followed him in the past, so as to gather their strength again and make a comeback in the future. Although he was already furious inside, he knew that now was not the time to settle the score, and only patience could accomplish great things. When he fully recovers his strength, it will be the day to collect the debt from those servants who betrayed him. By then, he would let everyone know clearly who is the real ruler of this world, who is the supreme being who rules the entire magic world. Without a doubt, that person can only be him, Voldemort. Just as Voldemort was thinking to himself, a sudden strange feeling came over him, causing his originally tense face to stiffen instantly. He was shocked to find that the extremely powerful dark mark he had cast on Lucius Malfoy had strangely disappeared without a trace. No. There's no way that's possible. Voldemort's eyes widened, and he muttered to himself in disbelief. He could not accept this fact, because he had planted the dark mark himself, and with it he could monitor Lucius Malfoy's every move at any time. But now, this mark has disappeared without any warning, as if it had never appeared. What does this mean? Could it be that Lucius Malfoy has found a way to remove the dark mark? Or has some more powerful force intervened and destroyed his mark? All kinds of speculations flooded into Voldemort's mind, causing him to fall into deeper fear and confusion. However, no matter what the truth was, it was undoubtedly an extremely dangerous signal for Voldemort. Losing control over Lucius Malfoy meant that his plans in the dark were seriously disrupted, and he might even face a total loss. No, we can't let this happen. Voldemort secretly vowed to find out what happened and take all necessary measures to save the situation. After all, he is Voldemort. How could he tolerate his authority being challenged like this? At the same time, on the other side of Malfoy Manor, Lucius was gazing at the lifelike, winged basilisk mark on his left arm with joy. Although it was just a change of blood curse, the profound meaning behind it was completely different. You know, he and Thomas are blood relatives, and now there is the bond with Draco. As long as the Malfoy family remains loyal to Thomas and does not have any rebellious thoughts, they can rest assured and enjoy peace. I have to say, this is the brilliant solution that Thomas came up with. Since the dark mark cannot be completely eliminated, then simply don't touch it, and choose to use the more powerful Quetzalcoatl blood curse to forcibly swallow up this hidden danger. In this way, not only the problem was solved once and for all, but the Malfoy family also had an extra layer of indestructible protection. Chapter 108. Before Voldemort could recover from his anger, the sound of the dark mark being disconnected kept ringing in his mind. It took a long time before they stopped. Voldemort's face turned pale. If the one who just cut off Lucius Malfoy's arm was just one of his arms, then now only his head was left of his entire body. Because in such a short period of time, at least 2/3 of the dark marks in his mind had disappeared, that is to say, except for the dozen or so dark wizards standing in front of him. In other words, his subordinates in Azkaban have obeyed his orders, but all his noble pawns in the outside world have rebelled. Damn it, Thomas Blake, I'm going to kill you now. As Voldemort's angry shouts rang out, the dark wizards present all bowed their heads and trembled, not daring to make any sound. Master, Master, you can't do this, you can't do this. Pettigrew hurried forward and tried to persuade him, with a flattering smile on his face. He couldn't let Voldemort do anything stupid. In the 2 years he had been with Ronald, he had seen too many of Thomas's plans and actions. At the beginning of the first semester, he killed the giant monster alone, and at the end of the semester, he uncovered the many mechanisms in the Chamber of Secrets and killed Voldemort and Quirrell. In the second semester, he founded the Fatui Wizard Club and solved the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets. He not only killed the original basilisk in the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, but also killed Voldemort for the second time. Now that the third semester has ended, there is no doubt that Thomas is now stronger than the previous 2 times. With Voldemort's current strength, wouldn't it be a pure gift of death? This cannot be allowed. You have to know that he is now wanted by the entire Eagle Kingdom Ministry of Magic, and Voldemort is still foolish enough to go up and get killed, so what should he do? Although we can continue to look for Horcruxes, will it be useful? Not to mention that he didn't know the location of the Horcrux. Even if he knew, he couldn't get it with his strength. It was more likely that he would be captured by the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic as soon as he went out. Then he could experience the full service from the Dementors of Azkaban, 12 years late for him. Shut up, Pettigrew. You have no right to speak here. The master can do whatever he wants. It's not your turn, a mouse. Little Barty spoke with a disdainful tone, his eyes full of mockery towards Pettigrew. He looked down on people like Pettigrew who were like rats from the bottom of his heart. He even felt that his master lowered the status of the Death Eaters by allowing such people to join the Death Eaters. Quiet. Voldemort had a gloomy face. He was well aware of the consequences of going to Thomas now. But he was unwilling to accept that the power he had painstakingly built up over the years would be destroyed in a single day. What I hate most in my life is betrayal. I believe that everyone here does not want to know what the fate of a traitor is. Voldemort glanced at the dark wizards present, and a hint of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. The dark wizards felt Voldemort's gaze and lowered their heads in fear, not daring to look him in the eye. Master, calm down. We still have a chance to regroup. Pettigrew said tremblingly. Opportunity? Can you tell me where the opportunity is? Voldemort roared. Pettigrew shrank his neck and spoke timidly. We can wait for the right opportunity and then develop our power in secret. Voldemort glared at him and interrupted him. Idiot! How can we develop now that we have lost so many supporters? At this time, little Barty came forward and offered advice. Master, we can use some means to control those ordinary wizards and make them our puppets. In this day and age, the idea of pure blood supremacy is no longer so useful. The current Minister of Magic, Fudge, is a fool. Excessive exploitation has already made those peasants very dissatisfied, but my distinguished master, I think this is our opportunity. After hearing this, Voldemort raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and seemed to be interested in this proposal. I'll leave this matter to you, little Barty. I hope you won't let me down. Of course, my respected master, I will never let you down. A cruel smile appeared on little Barty's face, which made Pettigrew tremble uncontrollably. MD, everyone here is crazy. If I don't want to live, damn it, now I don't even have the chance to quit. On the other hand, the Daily Prophet headquarters received an anonymous submission today, and the recipient of the submission was none other than our Minister of Magic, Fudge. Most of the contents were so shocking that many female commissioners in the Ministry of Magic covered their eyes. It left many male specialists with dry mouths. That's not a good idea. The editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet looked at his boss with some embarrassment and said, No, what's wrong with that? After this time, our Daily Prophet will reach a whole new climax. Besides, we are serving the wizarding world of Eagle Country, aren't we? Seeing that the editor-in-chief seemed to be about to say something, the owner of the Daily Prophet waved his hand impatiently and said, That's it. The Global Quidditch Tournament is about to begin. We're waiting for this hottest time to release it all at once. Go down. Okay, boss. The editor-in-chief sighed, walked out of the office weakly, came to a corner, and then took out a small magic camera. Put it behind the trash can and leave quickly. After a while, a snow-white owl appeared at the trash can, hooked its claws, grabbed the camera, and quickly flew away, flapping its wings. Sitting in the main seat of Malfoy Manor, Thomas looked at the photos in his hands with a smile on his face and couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect that old man Fudge would play so many tricks in private. Chapter 109. The wonderful drama is about to begin. The corners of Thomas's mouth rose slightly, revealing an imperceptible smile, but his eyes flashed with determination and confidence. Then he turned to face the deep shadow behind him and spoke softly. Contact my godfather immediately and order the saints to fully enter the Eagle Country's magic world. As soon as he finished speaking, a low and hoarse response came from the darkness. As you command, Master Thomas. An old man in a neat suit and with a kind face slowly walked out of the shadows. He was the famous white-tailed kite Johannes Welles. At this moment, the sky was filled with dazzling lights, and bright flares streaked across the sky like meteors. In an instant, thousands of wizards poured into the streets. Although most of these wizards were old, there were still many young and promising figures among them. They were dressed in spotless wizard robes or exquisite suits, with solemn expressions, as if they were carrying a sacred mission. This feast belongs to the saints, but it is the nightmare of the Ministry of Magic of each country. Because they know that the man who once shocked the whole world is about to return. Decades ago, this man triggered a global magic storm and drove everyone crazy. Now, he has reappeared, heralding a new war is about to begin. Countless envelopes fluttered down like heavy snow, piling up layer upon layer in the spacious and slightly quaint headmaster's office at Hogwarts. These letters came from ministries of magic around the world and conservative aristocratic families, and between the lines they revealed their concerns and uneasiness about the possible impact on their vested interests. However, deep down, they were also filled with fear about the actions of the saints. After all, the name wizardry is not in vain, but is forged with the blood and lives of countless wizards. They are well aware of the cruelty and power of this organization, so at this moment they can only pray silently, hoping that Dumbledore can stand up like he did 3 years ago and impose sanctions on Grindelwald again. Unfortunately, their good wishes ultimately came to nothing. At this moment, the headmaster's office at Hogwarts was empty, with only silence filling the air. It turned out that Dumbledore was no longer here. He was in Nurmengard, enjoying a pleasant afternoon tea time with Grindelwald. As for Professor McGonagall, who has always been rigorous and serious, she seemed unwilling to pay attention to the thorny mess in front of her. She devoted all her energy to taking care of her beloved goddaughter Elise. If we talk about which country in the global wizarding world is the calmest and most composed, there is no doubt that the Eagle Country is the best. At this moment, at least 2/3 of the wizard nobles in the entire Eagle Country magic world have joined Thomas. It can be imagined that once Thomas succeeds, these people will become true dragon followers. As long as you follow the adults' orders, even if you cannot be crowned king or marquis, it is definitely not a problem to increase the scale of your own industry by 30 to 40%. After all, they knew very well that the small Eagle Country's magic world could not accommodate that adults' grand ambitions and aspirations. This lord will certainly follow the example of the first Dark Lord and point his sword directly at the global wizarding world. Moreover, now even the White Lord Dumbledore is firmly standing behind the Lord to support him to the end. In this way, why should he worry about not accomplishing his great cause? As for Voldemort, haha, that little character who has never even set foot outside the Eagle Country's magic world is really not worth mentioning. On the other side, Voldemort's face instantly turned extremely gloomy after hearing this, and his face was full of displeasure. If Thomas really rose again, then the next game would not be fun. Little Barty, you have to act fast to deal with those idiots. Yes, Master. Also, Pettigrew, I need you to go to Azkaban and free my loyal men. Master. Master, you want me to break out of prison? Before Pettigrew had finished his words, Voldemort had already shown an extremely impatient look. Don't worry, you incompetent fool. Someone will go with you. Before he finished speaking, 6 or 7 wizards in black robes appeared behind Voldemort. Their faces were distorted and hideous, and it was obvious that they had overused the Avatar's gnawing melon spell, causing them to lose their minds and become crazy monsters who only knew how to kill. Don't let me down, Pettigrew. Yes, Master. Pettigrew swallowed his saliva, then sighed helplessly at the Death Eaters standing beside him who looked somewhat unconscious. At the Ministry of Magic, Fudge's face was livid as he looked at the letters on the table from Quidditch teams from various countries. The meaning of the letters was very simple. They all eagerly hoped that the Eagle Country's Ministry of Magic would come forward and invite Thomas Black to watch this crucial event. If not, many participating teams would probably flatly refuse to go to Eagle Country to participate in this highly anticipated Quebec regional competition. There is really nothing I can do. The recent large-scale entry of saints into the Eagle Country's magic world has caused a sensation and shocked the world. Although the host of this Quidditch competition has fallen to Eagle Country, considering the issue of personal safety, each Quidditch team is still eager to seek a reliable guarantee. After all, if precious lives are lost, then any glory will become meaningless. How abominable! I am the Minister of Magic! Fudge roared in rage and smashed items in the office out of control. Minister, can I come in? A voice came from outside the door. Enter. Fudge still roared angrily. When the secretary entered the room and saw the wreckage on the floor, she gasped and wondered why the minister had become more irritable lately. Write to Thomas Blake immediately and cordially invite him to come and watch the game. Fudge ordered, suppressing his anger. Although he was very unwilling in his heart, he had to do so. Otherwise, there would definitely be a huge failure in his political achievements. Of course, if he knew what would happen later, he might simply choose to strangle himself for making this decision today. Cousin, let's go, this is the Global Quidditch Tournament. Malfoy said excitedly. Theodore stood behind Thomas with a cold face. He would not be interested in any entertainment activities unless Thomas himself took part. Chapter 110. Let's go, it's nice to relax once in a while. Thomas said calmly. Woohoo, long live my cousin. Malfoy danced with excitement and cheered loudly. Daphne also silently took a step forward and gently took Thomas's arm, with a hint of expectation in her eyes. The breeze caressed the faces of the boys and girls and gently blew their hair. The sunshine sprinkled on their bodies, bringing a touch of warmth and making people feel happy. The four of them stood quietly on the edge of a cliff, with a worn-out leather boot in front of them. This leather boot looked ordinary, but it was actually the key to the Quidditch field. They simultaneously stretched out their hands and placed their palms on their leather boots. In an instant, the space around them began to spin rapidly as if under a spell. The surrounding scenery kept changing like a phantom, making it hard to keep up. Finally, everything came to a standstill, and they found themselves in a deep canyon. Looking around, densely packed tents dotted the vast land like stars. Countless wizards shuttled among them, making the place very lively. Along the way, many young wizards stopped and bowed to Thomas respectfully after seeing him. Obviously, these children were Hogwarts students who came to participate in the event with their parents. The entire stationing area is clearly divided into 3 levels: ordinary wizards, noble wizards, and the Ministry of Magic stationings of various countries. Each area has its own unique atmosphere and characteristics, showing the differences between different social classes. Haha, Thomas, you're finally here, but you kept us waiting for so long. Fudge said with a flattering look on his face. Thomas did not respond to this, but walked forward silently. The Saints were very powerful, and many of their members were senior executives of the Ministries of Magic in various countries. Although they had no real power, it was still easy for them to simply set up a tent. Fudge was very unhappy with Thomas's behavior, but he still smiled and nodded continuously. Soon a huge tent appeared in front of the 4 people. A traceless magic was cast in the tent, and the space inside was comparable to a villa. The interior was beautifully decorated and filled with delicious food and items. In order for Thomas to better enjoy watching the game, 2 house elves were arranged to provide special services. Thomas and others walked into the tent and sat on the soft sofa. Master Thomas, would you like me to pour you a drink? A house elf asked respectfully. Well, give me a cup of black tea. Thomas answered casually. Another elf quickly brought a plate of exquisite snacks and placed it on the table. Malfoy and Daphne were curious about everything here and looked around. At this time, Fudge came over with a smile. Thomas, I hope you can have a good time here. If you need anything, just let me know. Thomas nodded slightly in thanks. His eyes were always on the Quidditch field in the distance, as if he was thinking about something. Soon the grand Quidditch match began, and the wizards cheered wildly and excitedly. After all, the wizards who could still come to watch Quidditch at such a critical juncture were true fans who were not afraid of death. Accompanied by a formal Quidditch match usually lasts 3 to 4 days or a week, which is why everyone brings tents. Late at night, Thomas sat in the main seat and looked quietly into the distance. To be honest, he had no interest in this Quidditch game. He was just waiting to see if Voldemort had the guts to attack the Quidditch field to announce his return after having lost 2/3 of his supporters. Just as Thomas was thinking, a scream suddenly came from outside the tent. This scream was like turning on a switch, and the crowd soon became agitated. Daphne and the other 2 in the tent took out their wands and stood behind Thomas, ready for battle. Many local noble wizards from Eagle Country who came to watch the game also began to move towards Thomas's tent. Unlike those panicked civilian wizards, they had already received Lucius's warning when they came, and most of them had left their children at home. Then the game begins. Thomas took out his magic wand and waved it gently, and the tent was folded up instantly. When the wizards surrounding the tent saw Thomas appear, they all bowed in greeting. "Kill them all, leaving no one alive," Thomas said in a calm tone, without any emotion. The next second, hundreds of wizards surrounding Thomas began to move, targeting the Death Eaters who entered the Quidditch competition area. The huge feathered serpent roared, flapped its wings and soared into the air. The Death Eater who was originally laughing and eating a big melon in front of the crowd was stunned for a moment. The next second, without him noticing, dozens of figures appeared around him. Accompanied by a flash of dazzling green light, he collapsed to the ground powerlessly. Fainted. X10 plan. There was a crisp crashing sound, and all 10 spells hit the black transparent light wall. "I thought you had some sense, old Barty," Thomas said in a calm tone. You are Thomas Black, Headmaster Dumbledore's godson." The middle-aged man with red hair next to the old man in the windbreaker spoke. "That's right, Mr. Arthur Weasley. Speaking of which, your 3 sons are currently working under me. They are all excellent people. Thank you for the compliment. They are all students of Hogwarts, not Death Eaters." Arthur turned to the others around him and motioned for them to put down their wands. Thomas also removed the light shield, and the next moment Theodore moved. He raised his hand and punched Old Batty directly in the face, sending him flying 3 or 4 meters away. For a moment, everyone who had put down their wands, except Arthur Weasley, raised their wands again. These were Old Barty's confidants in the Ministry of Magic. Old Barty struggled to get up from the ground and looked at Theodore in disbelief. He didn't expect that he would be ambushed by a 4th-year student from Hogwarts. "I suggest you put down your wands first, otherwise, the consequences may not be good." As Thomas finished speaking, dozens of figures continued to appear around the crowd, and the number of people continued to increase. "Put it down, what are you still standing there for? Mr. Black is one of us." Old Barty hurriedly shouted to several of his confidants. He knew that if he didn't do this, no one on his side would survive today except Arthur Weasley. Chapter 111. After hearing what Old Batty said, those people quickly put away their wands. They were just pretending just now. After all, it was only a dozen gold galleons a month. There was no need to risk their lives for it. Thomas stepped forward, stood still, and looked down at Old Batty who was sitting on the ground with a condescending attitude, and then said in a contemptuous tone, "Old Barty, there is an old saying in our country that the man who knows the times is a hero. The fact that you can sit in your current position shows that you have some ability, but unfortunately you are unlucky. In my opinion, you are much wiser than that idiot Fudge." Old Barty lowered his eyes slightly and did not refute Thomas's words. In fact, he also agreed with this point deep in his heart. Fudge was simply a useless waste, without any talent at all, and was purely lucky. After a moment's silence, Old Batty raised his head and looked directly at Thomas and asked slowly. "So, Mr. Black, what do you need from me?" "Haha, that's refreshing. Communicating with smart people saves time and effort." Thomas nodded with satisfaction and then made his conditions. "As long as you do what I say, I can help you bring down Fudge and get you the position you've always dreamed of. And I can promise you that I will spare your son's life. You are probably aware that he is now following Voldemort's lackeys. This is no secret. Now that Voldemort has been reborn, your son will certainly submit to Voldemort and obey his orders. However, my ambitions go far beyond this. The British wizarding world alone cannot satisfy my appetite. I will never let go of anyone who tries to hinder my ambitions. I hope you understand my intentions. Of course, thank you for your generosity and kindness." Old Batty quickly responded that he had such a precious son at an old age, and young Batty was his only treasure, so he doted on him to the extreme. Even when Voldemort fell from power, he did his best to protect his son and prevent Barty Jr. from being imprisoned in the terrible Azkaban prison. At this moment, Thomas's attitude was clear. Anyone who stood in his way would die. With the White Lord firmly standing by his side and supporting him, there was only one person standing in his way, Voldemort. Now that a large number of saints have entered the Eagle Kingdom's magic world, at least 2/3 of the Death Eaters who originally supported Voldemort have defected. In comparison, Voldemort no longer has any chance of winning. From ancient times to the present, the principle that the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit is true everywhere and is very applicable at any time and in any place. For the sake of his beloved son, he knew that he could no longer continue to live in a muddle-headed and confused way. Just as he was lost in thought, he saw Thomas holding the magic wand and gently waving it, and a dark black light burst out from the tip of the wand. The mysterious black light shot towards Old Batty as fast as lightning and was instantly imprinted on his palm, leaving behind a lifelike feathered serpent pattern that seemed to be flying into the air. Old Batty recognized the magic at first sight, the blood curse, but he did not dare to resist at all, because he knew that the blood curse was not only the first proof of his loyalty to Thomas, but also a key step for him to gain the trust of Thomas and become his true confidant. "Sir, I have something to report. It's related to Voldemort." Old Batty took a deep breath and spoke, and subconsciously turned his head to look around at the densely packed wizards. "It's okay, just say what you want to say." Thomas responded expressionlessly. "My lord, Voldemort wants to use public opinion to control civilian wizards and launch an anti-pureblood campaign. The banner they hold high is to overthrow the evil capitalism and liberate the economic resources and wealth of the wizarding world that have been imprisoned for a long time." Thomas suppressed his laughter and continued to listen to Old Batty. "And the first person who needs to be eliminated is that useless idiot Fudge. Then it will be convenient to take action against the pureblood wizards." Old Batty continued the previous topic with a serious expression. "Their slogan is to reallocate resources." Thomas couldn't help laughing when he heard this. He couldn't imagine that Voldemort was so funny. A half-blood wizard who always preached the supremacy of pure blood and wantonly killed ordinary wizards, now suddenly began to advocate egalitarianism? Is there really anyone stupid enough to believe him? Well, maybe there are some simple-minded civilian wizards who choose to believe it, but so what? Don't worry, I will take care of these trivial matters. After all, not all the wizards are fools. Even if Voldemort can gather a certain number of supporters, he will not pose any threat to me." Thomas comforted Old Batty with a confident smile and gave him a reassuring look. Then Thomas added earnestly, "The cleanup operation is about to begin. Please take good care of your son, Old Batty." After saying this, he turned and left, leaving Old Batty alone to think about what had just happened. The next morning, the sun shone through the thin clouds and fell on the ground, forming patches of mottled light and shadows. At this moment, a piece of intelligence about the corruption of the Minister of Magic exploded in the Daily Prophet like a heavy bomb. The newspaper caused a sensation as soon as it was released. In just 5 minutes, all newsstands were sold out, as if a crazy storm had swept in. People rushed to pass the report around, with expressions of astonishment and anger on their faces. The enormous pressure of public opinion pressed down on Fudge like a mountain. Although most of the wizards in Eagle Country had become accustomed to this incompetent Minister of Magic, when they heard about these scandals, they still felt strong dissatisfaction in their hearts. "Damn it, how can that fat pig-like guy live so freely? Look at what the newspapers say. The money he took was all earned from our hard-earned money. This is so abominable. Damn the Ministry of Magic, I really want to beat that minister up." The leaky cauldron was filled with noise, and many wizards were indignant and angry at Fudge's behavior. Barty Jr. stood in the corner, watching everything that happened with a smug smile on his face. He was very satisfied with the situation and felt that it was time to go out and spread the great ideas of his distinguished master. Just as little Batty was about to leave, there was a slight clicking sound. The door of the bar slowly opened, and a group of middle-aged men in neat suits and silver badges walked in. They looked serious and walked steadily, revealing a kind of majesty and confidence. Chapter 112. The Broken Axe was originally very noisy, but the moment this group of middle-aged men stepped into the bar, the entire space seemed to be cast a silencing spell and instantly became silent. Everyone's eyes fell on these people. For one reason or another, the badges on their chests turned out to be the Deathly Hallows pattern designed by Grindelwald himself. What does this mean? Everyone present knew very well that these middle-aged people had only one identity, the legendary saint. The wizards of Eagle Country are naturally not fools. The concerted actions of the aristocracy and the quick response of the Ministry of Magic have long made them understand that the magical world has now welcomed a new master. Thomas Black, the heir of the Black family and godson of the dreaded White Lord, seems to have another identity, the successor of the saint. "Young Barty Crouch, come with us, the Lord wishes to see you." The leading saint pulled out his wand from his pocket expressionlessly, pointed it straight at the darkness in a corner of the bar, and said coldly, "See me? Haha, he's not worthy. With a sneer of disdain, a dark figure slowly emerged from the corner. Barty Crouch Jr. stood there, his eyes flashing with contempt and resentment. He is just a young boy, how can he be qualified to be our master? How can he compare to the great previous master? Little Batty's words were full of disrespect and ridicule towards the new master. However, in the face of his provocation, the saints did not react at all. They just surrounded him silently and trapped him in the middle. Barty Crouch Jr. glared at the saint in front of him, his eyes full of hostility. Do you think you can trap me like this? Avada eats big melon. He growled in a low voice. Suddenly, he waved the wand in his hand, and a green light shot out in all directions. The saints quickly dodged, but several people were still hit by the light and fell to the ground. Little Batty took the opportunity to break out of the encirclement and ran towards the door. Don't let him get away! The leading saint shouted, and the other saints immediately chased after him. However, at the critical moment, Batty Jr. used teleport and disappeared from everyone's sight. He can't get away. The leading saint said this with gnashing teeth. We will find him and make him pay for his actions. My lord, little Barty has escaped. The saints are currently trying their best to hunt him down. In addition, Azkaban prison has been attacked fiercely by the Death Eaters, and many imprisoned dark wizards have escaped. Theodore stood respectfully in front of Thomas and reported the situation in detail. Thomas slowly turned the teacup in his hand, looked toward the distant courtyard, and spoke softly as if talking to himself. I see. The bait has been cast. So what are you going to do next, Voldemort? At the same time, Voldemort fell into extreme madness. He was shocked to learn that all the Death Eaters who had been sent out and vowed to return to the team had died. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow, but as the saying goes, misfortunes never come alone. The so-called mud-legged plan planned by Barty the Younger did not go smoothly. However, among all the bad news, there was finally a slightly encouraging piece of good news. Peter Pettigrew succeeded. Azkaban had been breached, and at least more than 100 dark wizards were freed. In fact, Voldemort did not pay much attention to the life and death of those pawns in the outside world. After all, what really concerned him were those dark wizards who had been imprisoned in Azkaban. They were the elite forces under his command back then. At Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, sunlight shines through the stained glass windows onto the ancient stone walls, casting a magical glow. In this castle full of mystery and magic, Thomas sits at the dining table, sighing helplessly, stirring the glass of juice that has long lost its freshness. To be honest, given the current situation, he really couldn't find any reason to stay in the academy. At most, he would show up in the final stage of the upcoming competition and show his face. Originally, he had hoped to take advantage of this period of time to focus on improving his mastery of the black magic. After all, ever since he discovered that the color of the magic power released changed from dark green to as black as ink when he cast magic last time, he clearly realized that he had entered a critical bottleneck period. Just as Thomas was lost in thought, a burst of cheerful and joyful music filled the entire restaurant. The melody was like fairies dancing in one's ears, making one feel happy. However, for Thomas, who was upset at the moment, this sudden music became a distraction, making him feel extremely irritated. He could only concentrate on stirring the juice in front of him. Dumbledore's wrinkled but energetic face was filled with irrepressible excitement. His deep and bright eyes stared at the students below and he said in a loud voice, Dear fellow Hogwarts students! Today, I am very honored to announce a good news to you all. Our Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry has the honor of being selected as the host venue for this three-school competition. The Three Schools Tournament, as the name suggests, is a grand event jointly participated by 3 magic schools. Dumbledore raised his hands slightly and continued to explain. This competition will showcase the wonderful magic competitions among various colleges. Each college must select its best student representative to compete. He paused for a moment, glanced at the audience, and then continued to emphasize. I want to make one thing clear. The selected contestants must rely on their own strength and courage to fight to the end alone. This will not only test your magic skills, but also require unwavering faith and perseverance. Therefore, if anyone feels that their heart is not strong enough, then they may not be suitable for participating in such a high-intensity competition. We can discuss the specific situation later. Finally, Dumbledore raised his voice and shouted passionately, Now, please join me in warmly welcoming the lovely girls from Bubaston School of Magic. Dumbledore shouted. Thomas looked up and his eyes were drawn to the place. He saw a group of Beauxbatons female students in bright blue uniforms entering the venue with cheerful dance steps, followed closely by the long-lost Ms. Maxime. The group of girls jumped energetically, like a group of dancing butterflies, bringing a touch of bright color to the entire hall. Many Hogwarts boys cheered excitedly when they saw these youthful, lively, and beautiful Beauxbatons girls. However, for Thomas, such noise made him feel a little bored. In contrast, he preferred a quieter environment. Next, it's the proud students from Durmstrang, and their headmaster, Igor Karkaroff. As Dumbledore introduced the students, another unique sound came into their ears, the rhythmic sound of sticks hitting the ground. Then, a group of students with shaved heads and black uniforms walked into the hall in an orderly manner. Looking at the scene in front of him, Thomas muttered to himself, "Is this the so-called sports meet? A vocational high school, an art school, and a sports school." He was not particularly interested in this type of activity. Chapter 113. Sir, there is new information from the Saints. Theodore leaned forward, put his mouth close to Thomas's ear, and spoke in a low voice. Thomas's mouth curled up slightly when he heard this, revealing a barely perceptible smile. He slowly stood up from his seat, a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. Then, he nodded with a smile, indicating that he understood, and motioned for Theodore to go out with him to talk. At this moment, a cold snort suddenly came from inside the house. Humph, Hogwarts is really lacking in manners. The volume of this sentence was neither too loud nor too soft, just right for everyone present to hear clearly. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw that the person who spoke was Victor Krum from Durmstrang Academy of Magic. He looked at Thomas with disdain, his eyes full of contempt and provocation. Oh my God, how dare he talk to Mr. Black like that? Doesn't he know the identity and status of Thomas Blake? The students around him couldn't help but whisper to each other, and some even couldn't help laughing. They felt that Victor Krum was simply an ignorant fool. However, facing the strange looks from everyone, Victor Krum didn't care at all. In his eyes, the so-called etiquette, identity, and status were all illusory things, and only strength was the most important. And people like Thomas who relied on family background to support him didn't deserve his respect at all. In Durmstrang, people have always believed in the idea that the strong are respected. He looked down on Thomas's actions from the bottom of his heart. Of course, this is just Victor Krum's own opinion. In his opinion, Thomas is just a shameless person who bullies others by taking advantage of his power. Victor Krum's words were like a sharp sword, piercing the tense atmosphere at the scene. Theodore's face turned gloomy in an instant. He turned his head and stared at Krum, with flames of anger flashing in his eyes. "How dare you insult my lord? You deserve to die," Theodore said through gritted teeth. Krum showed no sign of weakness, he straightened his chest and looked Thomas straight in the eyes. "I'm just stating the truth. You, who rely on family power to support you, have no right to act arrogantly in front of me." The atmosphere on the scene became increasingly tense, as if a fierce battle was about to break out. "So, you just think I'm a loser who relies on my family background, right?" Thomas said with a playful smile on his face, not disguising himself. "Yes, that's what I think," Krum said disdainfully. Igor Karkaroff stared at Krum with his eyes wide open, almost fainting from anger. He knew very well that Grindelwald came from Durmlongsten, and the saint was undoubtedly powerful. The fact that Thomas could mobilize the saints was enough to show that he was definitely in Grindelwald's heart. What's more, Thomas was Dumbledore's godson. Just when Igor Karkaroff was about to teach Krum a lesson to avoid a tragedy, Krum's voice sounded again. "You should have watched the global Quidditch tournament, so you should know who I am." "Oh? Who are you?" "Just a little ball player," Thomas replied nonchalantly. "Let's give it a try if you have the guts. I can guarantee that you will not be able to leave this auditorium alive today," Krum threatened through gritted teeth. As soon as he finished speaking, before Krum could react, all the students at Hogwarts drew their wands at the same time and pointed them at him. Malfoy suddenly burst into laughter. "To make your way in the martial arts world, you need not only your strength but also your background. What qualifications do you, a small fry like you, have to challenge my cousin?" Krum obviously did not expect Hogwarts to be so united, and he had to admit that he did underestimate Thomas's influence, but that didn't matter to him. After all, with his own strong strength, he has no rivals in the whole Durmstrang, and Thomas is just an insignificant fourth-year student at Hogwarts. The reason why these students obey Thomas's orders must be because Thomas has the support of the famous Godfather Dumbledore. No, he must save these Hogwarts students who are oppressed by the aristocracy. What's more, the female students of Beauxbatons were watching him at the moment, and he must not lose face in front of the girls. Thomas Blake, you are not a hero if you rely on your numbers. If you have the guts, let's fight it out alone. Krum yelled indignantly. Oh? Do you really want to fight me alone? Thomas's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a half smile. For some reason, Krum suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. Yes, so what? Krum shouted with his eyes wide open. Although he felt a little weak inside, he still stood up straight. It didn't matter if he lost the game standing up, but he couldn't lose to the opponent in aura. He didn't believe that this Durmstrang champion who respected strength would be defeated by a little Hogwarts fourth-year student. Very well, I'll leave it to you, Godfather. Thomas raised the corner of his mouth slightly and responded softly. Be careful with your strength. Dumbledore said with a worried look on his face. He was really worried that Thomas would get impulsive and beat to death the students sent by other schools to participate in the Triwizard Tournament. After all, he could clearly feel the surging and terrifying magic power in Thomas's body, which seemed to be about to rival his own. Please rest assured, Godfather. I know what I am doing. Thomas assured Dumbledore. Hearing Thomas's answer, Dumbledore nodded with satisfaction, then pulled out a wand from his robe pocket and waved it gently. In an instant, the originally bustling hall became empty, and everyone was teleported to the open grass outside. Friendship comes first, competition comes second. Hello, students. I am your Professor Flitwick. It is my honor to be the host of this competition. After Thomas and Krum took their positions and bowed to each other, Professor Flitwick announced loudly with a smile. Then the competition officially begins. Following Professor Flitwick's order, all the audience focused their attention on the field. Thomas tightly grasped the wand in his hand and chanted a spell. Fire, fire! Instantly, a powerful magical power gushed out from him, sweeping across the entire stadium like a black whirlwind. Then, the surging black flames seemed to be given life, and quickly condensed into a huge, hideous dragon. The dragon opened its bloody mouth, spewed out blazing flames, and roared at Krum with a deafening roar. The audience was all shocked, especially the students from the other two colleges besides Hogwarts. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Is this true? Li Huo, this kind of advanced black magic can actually be performed by a fourth-grade student. Someone exclaimed. Humph, you country bumpkin, what do you know? This is our cousin Thomas. His strength is beyond the imagination of ordinary people like you. Malfoy raised his head triumphantly, pointed his nose at the Durmstrang students, and said contemptuously. Furong's beautiful eyes moved slightly, revealing a hint of surprise. She could never have imagined that in just 1 year, Thomas's strength would improve so quickly and become even stronger. Facing the terrifying fire dragon summoned by Thomas, Krum did not retreat, but held his wand tightly, ready to meet the challenge. Thomas looked at the opponent in front of him, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and said confidently. I won't bully you. As long as you can defeat my fire dragon, I will lose. How about that? Chapter 114. As soon as Thomas finished speaking, he quickly put away his wand and stared at Krum with sharp eyes. Durmstrang, never back down. Krum roared loudly, his voice resounding through the sky. Then he uttered a string of spells. Armor protects you. A layer of dazzling golden light suddenly appeared and tightly wrapped around his body. Before the light faded, Krum waved his wand again and shouted. The flames are blazing. In an instant, raging flames gushed out, surrounding him and forming a blazing wall of fire. Finally, he took a deep breath and shouted with all his might. Flocks of birds. A flock of colorful birds responded, flapping their wings happily and circling above Krum's head. At this moment, Krum is like a brave and fearless warrior, wearing golden armor, surrounded by flames, and a flock of birds flying above his head, as if he is challenging the evil dragon. If he is equipped with a sword, the image will be even more realistic. However, facing the aggressive Krum in front of him, the black dragon formed by the fierce fire just snorted contemptuously, then opened its bloody mouth and violently spewed out a jet of inky black flames. Wherever the flames passed, the flock of birds was instantly reduced to ashes, without even a trace of ashes left. Then, the black dragon gently swung its huge tail, easily dispersing the orange flames and hitting Krum hard. With a crisp crack sound, Crumb's extremely hard armor shattered into countless pieces in an instant and scattered all over the ground. He himself was also severely injured, spitting blood, and his body flew backwards like a kite with a broken string, and finally fell heavily to the ground, unconscious. Thomas Black from Hogwarts wins! Professor Flitwick shouted excitedly. As soon as the words fell, a thunderous cheer broke out in the arena. The audience clapped and cheered crazily. Glory to Thomas, glory to Hogwarts! Glory to Thomas, glory to Hogwarts! However, not everyone was satisfied with the result. Some students from the other two colleges were shocked and puzzled, unable to believe what was happening before their eyes. Someone murmured to himself. Isn't this the end? Others complained angrily. What the hell is this? Why not just give the championship to Hogwarts? Some even shouted. There's a cheat, there's a cheat. Hearing these doubts, the faces of the students from the other two colleges became even worse. This duel was supposed to be a fierce contest, but now it has become a one-sided situation. Especially seeing Crumb, who is known as the strongest in Durmstrang, also fell, the fire of hope in everyone's heart was extinguished instantly. Everyone shook their heads and sighed, with looks of despair on their faces. After all, even the strongest player had lost, so who else could they count on? For a moment, the whole scene fell into chaos, and disappointment and dissatisfaction filled the air. At this moment, the victorious party, the teachers and students of Hogwarts Academy, were immersed in great joy and pride. Amid the cheers of the audience, Thomas walked over to Crumb and bent down to check his injuries. He just fainted, his life is not in danger. Madame Pomfrey said to Thomas with a look of relief after carefully examining Crumb. Hearing this news, Thomas finally felt relieved. He was secretly glad that he had reacted quickly and controlled the fire dragon and restrained its power in time, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. Recalling the thrilling scene just now, Thomas couldn't help but feel scared. He didn't expect Crumb to be so fragile. He had already restrained his strength, but he hit him once and almost killed him. This fierce competition not only made Thomas deeply aware of his own strength, but also gave him a deeper understanding of the magical world of magic. At this moment, he seemed to be able to clearly feel that the thin membrane between himself and the 8th level magic power was gradually becoming transparent and within reach. Dumbledore, who was standing aside, witnessed the whole process. Looking at the other two school headmasters who had different and slightly embarrassed expressions, he coughed twice and a gentle smile appeared on his face. Well, don't be too nervous, everyone. These kids are still young, and it's understandable that they are a little impulsive occasionally. After all, they are still young, and fighting and playing is a common thing, isn't it? At this moment, Maxim and Karkaroff were extremely conflicted. They really wanted to turn around and leave immediately, but they knew that if they did so, the reputation of the school would suffer a serious blow. From then on, the world would think that Bosbatons and Durmstrang were far inferior to Hogwarts. Chapter 115. The registration place for the Three Schools Cup was a giant trophy with a blazing flame, and the scorching flames seemed to engulf the entire world. All the students had to do was to throw a piece of paper with their names on it into the flaming cup filled with mysterious power. However, to ensure the fairness of this magic competition, the organizers set strict rules. Each magic school can only send one representative to participate in the competition. At the same time, the age of the contestants is also clearly limited, they must be at least 17 years old. More importantly, it is forbidden for others to register on behalf of others, and only the person himself can obtain the qualification to participate. At this moment, the atmosphere in the Fatui meeting room was extremely tense, and the 8 members in school sat together in a circle. Cheating, this is absolutely blatant cheating. Malfoy roared, his face flushed with anger. You are absolutely right. They are obviously afraid of your strength. Theodore echoed with equal indignation. Just when everyone was in a gloomy mood, Hermione suddenly had an idea. She quickly flipped through the notes in her hand and said thoughtfully. Perhaps, we could try to sign up with the help of an aging potion. Before he finished speaking, the Weasley twins cheered excitedly as if they had been injected with a shot of stimulant. Good idea. What a brilliant idea. It was obvious that they greatly appreciated Hermione's proposal and were looking forward to it. Speaking of the topic of potions, I think we can go to Professor Snape for help. After all, this is also a glory for Slytherin College. So, I guess he will most likely agree to this. Daphne offered her suggestion. However, even so, everyone still felt that it was necessary to take foolproof measures. At this moment, Harry, who had been sitting quietly in the corner without saying anything, suddenly realized that all the eyes around him were focused on him. Then, the Weasley twins took out a small skirt and a bottle of potion with ease. "Is this really okay?" Harry looked embarrassed and hesitant. "There's nothing wrong with that, Harry, it's all for the greater good. Come on, drink it, it's all for the greater good." Fred and George persuaded in unison. "Oh, by the way, there's also a bottle of S*X changing potion here. You know, just changing your hair color isn't enough anymore." Before Harry could object, Malfoy and his gang looked at each other, then rushed towards Harry in unison. In the blink of an eye, there was a bang, and Harry, who had disappeared for 2 whole semesters, reappeared in front of everyone. At the same time, Thomas and Cedric were leisurely strolling along the long and mysterious corridor of Hogwarts. "Sir, regarding this 3-school competition, I am willing to participate in it." Cedric spoke softly, with a hint of hesitation in his tone, as if trying to find out what Thomas thought. After all, if Thomas decided to participate, the outcome of the game would almost be a foregone conclusion. For nearly 100 years, Hufflepuff Academy has not achieved remarkable honors. As a member of the Academy, Cedric has a strong desire in his heart when he is about to graduate, hoping to win a glory for his alma mater. After hearing this, Thomas remained unusually calm and responded nonchalantly. "Then go and join us." To him, this was just a trivial matter. However, he saw all the hard work that Cedric had put in over the past 2 years. It is no exaggeration to say that compared to the image in the original book, Cedric has made considerable progress and improvement. In addition, judging from the current strength of the 2 colleges, Thomas had no doubt that even if Malfoy took the field, he would be able to easily sweep the other 2 colleges. On the other side, there was a gentle knock on the door of Snape's office. Snape, who had been concentrating on making the potion and was about to finish, was suddenly startled by the sudden sound. His hand trembled and he lost control of the wand in his hand, causing the ingredients of the potion to become disordered. The whole pot of potion instantly caught fire and turned into ashes. Snape jumped up from his seat in anger, waving his black robes, and strode to the door. He cursed in his heart, who was the brainless idiot who dared to disturb him at this critical moment. He must make the other person suffer. What on earth is going on? Snape spoke viciously, the venom in his mouth about to gush out, but he swallowed the words back, because at this moment, the person standing outside the door was a beautiful girl wearing a Gryffindor school uniform, with long red hair and a pair of green eyes. "Lily. Teach, Professor." Harry's voice was gentle and soft, like a spring breeze blowing past Snape's ears, hitting the softest part of his heart. At this moment, Snape felt that his iron heart was about to melt. Is it not disturbing you, Professor?" Harry lowered his head and asked timidly. No, how could it bother me? Serving students is what we teachers should do," Snape said righteously. "The messenger of justice, the Cobra King of the Snake Court, the Bat Guard in the dark." Snape is online again. "Tell me, Harry, is there something you need the professor's help with, or are those brats in the academy making you unhappy? Tell me, and I'll help you deal with it," Professor Snape said righteously while looking at Harry in front of him. Harry lowered his head, hesitated slightly, and then mustered up the courage to speak. No, Professor Snape, I want an aging potion." Hearing this request, Professor Snape frowned slightly, but did not show much surprise. He seemed to have guessed Harry's purpose and asked softly. "Aging potion? Harry, do you want to participate in the 3-school competition?" Harry nodded in agreement. Professor Snape's tone turned a little more serious. "Let Thomas and the others handle this dangerous game. Harley, you are a girl. This kind of dangerous game is not suitable for you to participate in." However, Harley shook her head and said firmly. "No. I'm not the one joining, Professor Snape. We're the ones trying to sign Thomas up." After hearing this, Professor Snape's expression relaxed a little. In his opinion, as long as Harry didn't do it himself, then it was up to the black kid to choose how to face death. After a moment of silence, Professor Snape turned to the bookshelf and took down a thick magic book. He searched for a while and found the formula and materials needed to make the aging potion, and told Harry in detail. Harry listened carefully to Professor Snape's explanation, memorizing every step and precaution carefully, and then took out the prepared aging potion and handed it to Harry. As for why I had to explain it before, it was of course to spend more time with Harry. Harry thanked Professor Snape and hurried out of the office. Not long after, Harry returned to the Fatui common room with a large number of precious potions. She carefully placed the potions on the table, praying in her heart that this effort could help. Thomas. Chapter 116. During the defense against the dark arts class, an elderly man in a brown windbreaker suddenly opened the door and walked in. His unique appearance and aura made many students present gasp. The man's left leg was obviously different from that of an ordinary person. It was not a complete leg, but a prosthetic leg made of a wooden strip, which served as a support for the body. What was even more shocking was that he only had one eye left, and the other eye was covered by a magic eye mask made by alchemy, which looked extremely strange and terrifying. "My name is Alastair Moody, and I will be your new defense against the dark arts professor." The man's voice was low and hoarse, as if it contained endless power. "Professor Lupin is unable to continue teaching at Hogwarts due to some personal matters. From now on, I will be in charge of your courses." Then he added thoughtfully, "I used to be an excellent orator, but later I became dissatisfied with the Ministry of Magic, so I accepted the invitation of Headmaster Dumbledore and came here." After saying this, Moody looked around the classroom and asked with a cold gaze, "Does anyone have any questions?" After a brief silence, Moody nodded slightly to show his satisfaction. Then, he said seriously, "When it comes to defense against the dark arts, I have always adhered to the principle that practice makes perfect." After a brief pause, he continued, "Well, first of all, why don't you tell me how many unforgivable curses there are?" Finally, he fixed his eyes on Thomas. "Mr. Black, I think you should know the answer." Thomas narrowed his eyes slightly and answered with a hint of amusement. "That's natural, Professor Moody. There are 3 types in total." He paused and continued, as if to emphasize the importance of this number. "That's right. Mr. Black should also be aware that anyone who uses any of these 3 types of magic will be immediately sent to Azkaban." Professor Moody's tone was very stern, and it made people feel a little nervous. "So, what does Professor Moody mean now?" Thomas suddenly raised his voice, with a hint of displeasure in his eyes. "Are you doubting me?" As soon as the words fell, the already solemn atmosphere became even colder. Moody could clearly feel that the temperature in the room had dropped by several degrees in an instant. The students in the classroom had previously revealed some fear and curiosity in their eyes, but now they were all replaced by indifference. Many students unconsciously clenched their wands, as if they were ready to deal with any possible conflict at any time. Faced with this situation, Professor Moody quickly explained, "Of course not, Mr. Black. I have absolutely no intention of doubting you. After all, you are the godson of the White Lord. With your status and position, how could you learn those evil and unforgivable spells?" Hearing this, Thomas knew that the old man was speaking in a sarcastic way, and he sneered. He thought to himself, "Humph, if Dumbledore hadn't specifically reminded me this time, I would have practiced the killing curse to perfection, so black that it would be shiny. I would have demonstrated it to you right then and there." But he still answered politely, "Of course." Moody saw that Thomas was not fooled. His frown tightened even more involuntarily. He turned his head and looked at Malfoy, and said, "In that case, let Mr. Malfoy introduce an unforgivable curse first." Malfoy hesitated slightly when Moody called his name, but responded quickly, "The Imperious Curse." Moody seemed very satisfied with this answer and he nodded in comment. "Very good, Mr. Malfoy's answer is very correct. You know, our Ministry of Magic had a lot of headaches because of this spell back then." After saying these words, Moody slowly walked up to the podium and carefully took out a spider from a jar on the podium. Then, he raised his wand and chanted a spell at the spider. "Brutal Devour, Imperious Curse." A surprising scene happened. The spider, which was petite just now, swelled up at an alarming speed in the blink of an eye, became extremely huge, and pounced on Malfoy with its fangs and claws. Faced with this sudden attack, Malfoy reacted quickly, drawing his wand without hesitation and chanting a spell quickly. "The flames are blazing." In an instant, raging flames gushed out, sweeping over like a fire dragon, instantly engulfing the giant spider that was rushing towards it and burning it to ashes. Looking at all this in front of him, Malfoy raised the corner of his mouth slightly, revealing a hint of disdain. Malfoy then said with a playful tone, "Perhaps Professor Moody has not yet fully mastered how to control his strange magic props. After all, Thomas had already informed them about some of Moody's methods and details before the class started. Since Moody wanted to use this method to discuss them, Malfoy naturally would not give Moody any good face. He had no fear in his heart. After all, Thomas was sitting next to him, and his cousin would not allow anything to happen to him. Moody's face looked a little ugly, but he didn't say much. He just turned his head and looked at Thomas fiercely, then continued. However, many wizards and witches claim that they were influenced by this spell and were so convinced and obedient to the mysterious man, but I don't think so. As soon as the words fell, the temperature in the venue dropped again, as if falling into an ice cellar. Many students from the Snake Academy looked extremely ugly, because many of their parents were once part of these people. Mr. Black, why don't you demonstrate the other two unforgivable curses to everyone? After all, with your Black family's vast collection of precious books, I firmly believe that you must have a considerable understanding of these two spells. Thomas stared coldly at Moody, who still refused to give up, and a trace of disgust welled up in his heart. But since he was so eager to see it, why not just fulfill his wish? Thinking of this, Thomas's mind moved, and he drew his wand from his large wizard robe without hesitation, pointed it directly at Moody, and shouted loudly. Avada eats big melon. Black magic shot out from the tip of Thomas's staff, forming a giant black python that kept circling around Moody. The breath of death continued to spread on the giant python. Moody could clearly feel that if he touched this black giant python, he would die immediately. That's right, with the killing spell reaching level 9 in proficiency, it has completely escaped the original ray range and can be directly condensed into physical objects. Chapter 117. Moreover, the giant python transformed by the killing curse was dark black, as if it was a demon born from the dark abyss. As everyone knows, the killing curse usually appears green, but as the number of people killed gradually increases, its color will become deeper and richer. However, the killing curse released by Thomas at this moment was so black as ink. It was hard to imagine how many innocent lives he had killed to make the killing curse so terrifying. Moody became more and more terrified. If it weren't for the suffocating, life-threatening aura of death, Moody even suspected for a moment that Thomas was not casting the killing curse, but some more evil and terrifying spell. It looks like Professor Moody is a little exhausted, right? Thomas said this in a tone full of sarcasm and contempt, and then waved the magic wand in his hand. In an instant, the huge black python quickly dissipated into the air like smoke. After losing the pressure of the breath of death, Moody's long-stretched nerves suddenly relaxed, and his body fell heavily to the ground uncontrollably. Thomas watched all this without saying a word. He stood up and left. Not long after, everyone in the classroom left, leaving Moody alone, collapsed on the ground, unable to recover. In the Slytherin common room, Thomas was sitting on the sofa studying spells when suddenly a scream was heard and a blonde girl in a blue uniform walked in. "It's really not easy to see you," Fleur said softly. The Slytherin common room was silent, with people around giving him various looks. Malfoy and Theodore exchanged a knowing look. This is how things should be. No matter how outstanding a girl is, she is just one of the many girls in Hogwarts, and she will be madly infatuated with their charming cousin, sir. However, at this moment, Daphne frowned slightly. She was keenly aware that the beautiful woman in front of her was emitting a strong threatening aura. "Thomas, have some dessert and take a rest. You must be tired after reading for so long," Daphne said softly, while gracefully picking up a glass of juice from the table and handing it to Thomas. "Thanks." Thomas politely took the juice from Daphne's hand, took a sip, and then turned his gaze to Fleur in front of him. "I'm sorry, but I don't plan to participate in this three-school competition. Please go back." His voice was calm and firm, leaving no room for negotiation. At this moment, Thomas was fully focused on a crucial spell research, so he had no time to tangle with Fleur. For him, every minute and every second was extremely precious and could not be wasted, because it was related to whether he could become more powerful. "Who said I came here just for this? Can't I just meet an old friend?" Furong responded with a hint of resentment. Then she asked with a slightly sad tone. "Did you read the letter I wrote to you? It's been a full year and a half, but you haven't even sent me a reply." Furong's tone was full of grievance, as if she had been treated extremely unfairly. When the surrounding snakes heard this, they could not help but think of Thomas as a heartless man who abandoned his family, while poor Furong was like a resentful woman who stayed alone in her empty room, desperately waiting for her husband to return. However, facing Furong's questioning, Thomas remained unusually calm and indifferent. He replied calmly. I don't think anyone has any obligation to answer your letter, has he? In fact, Thomas did read the letters from Fleur, but the contents were almost the same, asking him whether he had eaten and what he had eaten. Usually, he only had to glance at them and then lost interest in reading them. In contrast, the letters from Lockhart were more interesting, at least they let him know which areas had been affected by unrest. Daphne keenly grasped the meaning of Thomas's words and realized that the purpose of the woman's visit was not simple, she was obviously here to steal someone's boyfriend. So Daphne said neither humbly nor arrogantly. Hello, Miss Fleur. As Thomas said, he is busy with his work at the moment. If you have any questions or needs, you can communicate with me later and I will be responsible for conveying the information to him. After saying this, Daphne gave Thomas a tacit look, indicating that she fully understood and supported his position. Thomas was very satisfied with Daphne's performance and secretly admired her. He knew that without Daphne as his right-hand man, his 4 years at Hogwarts would not have been so smooth. It was because of her by his side that many difficult problems could be solved easily. Faced with Daphne's well-reasoned response, Fleur did not back down, but quickly launched a counterattack. Well, excuse me for asking, miss, what is your relationship with Thomas? The sudden questioning caused the powerful Daphne to fall into a brief silence. Before Thomas was not present, she could declare herself his girlfriend without hesitation, but the current situation made her feel a little embarrassed. After some thought, Daphne took a deep breath and answered firmly. I'm Thomas's fiancée. As soon as the words fell, everyone present was stunned. Obviously, this news was beyond their expectations. This melon was really big. For a moment, the whole room fell into silence. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to deal with this sudden situation. Ah! Chapter 118. Oh my god, what is going on? It's too fierce, it's really too fierce. Many little snakes in the snake farm have begun to secretly call their friends and invite them who are not present to watch this grand event together. The students who joined the news department couldn't wait to take out their magic cameras and start filming. They had a feeling that Hogwarts would definitely be in the headlines this time. Thomas, who was sitting on the sofa, urgently activated the tactical water drinking mode. The current situation had somewhat exceeded his expectations, so he was ready to go all out and just start. Is that so, Thomas? She is really your fiancée? Furong said with a trembling voice. Thomas, tactical drinking water. Yes, Ms. Delacour, I think I have made it very clear. Please don't harass Thomas anymore. Daphne said confidently. In her opinion, Thomas's lack of objection meant that he agreed. We did it, ha 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 ha, sir, we did it. Great, we did it, my lord. 2 bursts of laughter came from the door of the Slytherin common room. With a burst of hearty laughter, 3 figures in Gryffindor school uniforms appeared in front of everyone. It was the Weasley twins and Harry. Their faces were filled with confident and high-spirited smiles. Seeing the reinforcements coming, Thomas jumped up from the sofa without hesitation, rushed to the door like an arrow, and said without looking back. Let's go to the Fatui's lounge and discuss this. Before he could finish his words, Thomas left as fast as a whirlwind, leaving only the closed door of the Slytherin common room behind him. The Fatui meeting room was packed with people, and every seat was occupied. Except for Sirius who was sitting on the Diao Yute, all other members were present. Report to the Lord, this operation was a great success. The effect of the aging potion was perfect. Well said. With the adults personally taking action, the crown of this Triwizard tournament will definitely go to our Hogwarts. The Weasley brothers echoed in unison, their words full of confidence and admiration for this mysterious adult. For a moment, the entire conference room was filled with an exciting and enthusiastic atmosphere, and everyone was in high spirits and could hardly suppress their excitement. However, in this jubilant and noisy scene, only Cedric seemed out of place. He sat quietly in a corner, his eyes revealing a trace of loneliness and sadness that was difficult to conceal. Because he knew very well in his heart that once this adult with unfathomable strength decided to participate in the competition, the outcome of this game would actually have been determined. At the late-night banquet, all the students from the 3 schools gathered together. Professor Dumbledore stood quietly beside the goblet of fire, with a gentle and mysterious smile on his face, and he spoke softly. Please take a seat. Now is the time for the Warriors qualifying tournament that you have been waiting for. His deep gaze swept across the audience, as if he could see through everyone's deepest desires and tensions. In the blazing flames of the Holy Grail, suddenly, a red light flashed, and a piece of paper flew out of the sea of fire like a dancing butterfly, and landed lightly in Dumbledore's palm. He lowered his head slightly, stared at the paper in his hand, and then announced loudly. "The warrior from Durmstrang Academy, Victor Krum." As Dumbledore finished speaking, a tall man with half of his body wrapped in bandages slowly walked out of the crowd. His steps seemed a little heavy, but his eyes revealed determination and courage. A slight cheer broke out from the crowd, but the sound was not enthusiastic, because most people did not have high expectations for this disabled warrior with a strong will. Then, another piece of paper spewed out from the goblet of fire. Dumbledore took the paper and read out the name. "The champion of Beaux Batons is Fleur Delacour." Cheers rang out again, but they were still sparse. This time the cheers mainly came from the students of Beaux Batons Academy. However, in the next moment, something unexpected happened. The goblet of fire seemed to have a malfunction, and it spit out 3 pieces of paper in succession. This sudden change made the representatives of the other 2 schools look dissatisfied, and the atmosphere on the scene suddenly became tense. The 3 pieces of paper represent 3 warriors, and the other 2 colleges have already been allocated, which means that these 3 warriors are all from Hogwarts. 3 names appeared on 3 pieces of paper in the sky at the same time. Thomas Blake, Harry Potter, Cedric Godier. Waves of angry and unwilling roars spread rapidly like a tide to the place where the students from the other 2 colleges gathered. As for who the other 2 contestants were, it was still unknown, but just hearing the name of Thomas Blake, everyone knew that this game was already a foregone conclusion. What the hell is going on? RNMD, give us our money back. For a moment, everyone was outraged and the scene was in chaos. Even the headmasters of the 2 colleges looked extremely gloomy. After looking at each other, they all turned their gazes to Professor Dumbledore standing on the podium, as if they wanted to get a reasonable explanation from him. However, at this moment, Thomas suddenly felt an extremely powerful and terrifying magical force firmly locking the other 2 school principals. What was strange was that this mysterious magic did not come from Dumbledore himself. Thomas was startled and looked in the direction where the magic power came from. He saw an old man with white hair and a well-tailored suit standing not far away, waving at him gently with a friendly smile. Although the old man's appearance was slightly different from before, Thomas recognized at a glance that the person in front of him was Grindelwald in disguise after performing transfiguration. In an instant, the presidents of the 2 schools, who were very dissatisfied just now, suddenly wilted and looked extremely ugly. They were not sure who this magic power belonged to, but they knew that if they dared to say anything against it, the next second, they could appear on the picture frame of the principal's office of their respective colleges and become history. My goodness, the husband is protected even at Hogwarts. Thomas shook his head helplessly. Dumbledore on the platform smiled and winked at Thomas, as if to say that everything was going as planned. Come to think of it, how could the magic circle set up by Dumbledore himself be broken by just the aging potion drunk by the Weasley brothers? The only reason for this is that Dumbledore personally took action. Oh, how could this happen? The Goblet of Fire has never made a mistake in thousands of years. F#82 number. Dumbledore said with some sigh. But there is no other way, we have to follow the rules. Chapter 119. The other 2 headmasters were so angry after hearing what Dumbledore said. You, Dumbledore, actually broke the rules first, and now you are teaching us to follow the rules. Can you be a little thicker-skinned? The 2 cursed in their hearts. However, they dared not to show it easily. After all, from ancient times to the present, there has been an unwritten rule in the entire wizarding world: strength determines everything, and whoever has more powerful power has the final say. There are a total of 6 warriors sent by each of the 3 schools, but in the end, only one brave man can hold this trophy high. It represents supreme glory. The Triwizard Tournament has officially begun. Along with Dumbledore's passionate and generous words, a trophy shining with faint blue light and silver light suddenly appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, in the contestant lounge, Thomas was sitting on the sofa, stroking Elisa's smooth hair, while Harry and Cedric stood on either side. Fleur was originally planning to reach out and touch the adorable little white-haired girl, but before she could touch her, she was met with a hostile look from Elise. Humph, you bad woman who tried to take my father away, Iris won't let you touch me. After hearing what Iris said, Furong showed a hint of embarrassment on her face, but she quickly regained her composure and silently withdrew her hand. At the same time, Thomas also felt a headache coming. He frowned and sighed helplessly. "I'm sorry, Fleur. Elise didn't mean that." However, Elise did not seem to understand Thomas's explanation. She blinked her innocent eyes and asked in confusion, "Father, but my mother told me that this sister is a bad woman who wants to take you away." Thomas was stunned. He never expected Elise to say such a thing. Facing Elise's innocent and lovely face and questioning eyes, he suddenly didn't know how to answer. Finally, he had no choice but to wave his hand helplessly and signaled Harry to take Elise to find Professor McGonagall. At this moment, Krum, who was standing in the corner, was looking at Thomas with an almost worshipful gaze. In his eyes, Thomas was simply an invincible existence, young and promising, successful in his career, and even had his own child. Moreover, he could even bring his child to the academy, which was really amazing. Thomas naturally noticed Krum's strange look, but he had no idea what was going on in his mind. If Krum knew what Thomas was really thinking at the moment, he would probably be awakened by the burning fire. With a burst of tight and hurried footsteps, the principals of the 3 major colleges and the professors of Hogwarts walked into the contestant lounge together. Their steps seemed a little heavy, as if foreshadowing the upcoming tense atmosphere. "Dumbledore, I demand that you give us a reasonable explanation immediately." Karkaroff shouted angrily, his dissatisfaction obvious in his voice. However, Thomas responded in an unusually calm tone. "Explanation? Hogwarts doesn't have to explain to anyone." Just as Karkaroff was about to continue his argument, suddenly, an extremely powerful magical power swept towards him like a surging wave. This magical power was like a mountain pressing down on one's head, making it difficult for one to breathe. Karkaroff was shocked to realize that the source of this terrifying power was actually the young man in front of him. Maxim turned his head away in horror, but his heart was already in turmoil. Only a year and a half had passed, and the magic power contained in this boy had increased so amazingly. He couldn't help but think to himself, could this really be a monster? At the same time, Krum, who was curled up in the corner, fell into a state of madness. The respect for the strong was deeply imprinted in Krum's blood and became their eternal creed. At this moment, Thomas's unparalleled strength made Krum deeply trapped and unable to extricate himself. His admiration for Thomas became more and more fanatical. "Okay, Karkaroff, Thomas is just a child after all, and children's words are innocent. I hope you don't take it to heart," Dumbledore said softly, looking at Karkaroff with a smile on his face. Karkaroff was stunned when he heard this. "Come on! Can you call this a child?" He couldn't help but curse in his heart. However, facing the respected Professor Dumbledore and the powerful magic pressure, he couldn't refute directly, so he could only smile bitterly and nodded. At this time, Dumbledore turned his gaze to Thomas and asked gently. "So, Thomas, your names appeared in the Goblet of Fire. Did you put them in there yourself?" Thomas nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore, we put it in there ourselves. We just wanted to give it a try, but we didn't expect it to actually work." Then he said modestly. "Otherwise, I'd better withdraw from this competition to avoid being unfair to the other 2 schools. After all, I'm only a 4th-year student at Hogwarts. If the outside world knew that I defeated the 7th-year top students from the other 2 magic schools, it would probably cause quite a bit of controversy." As he spoke, his eyes revealed a barely perceptible hint of pride and contempt. Although the presidents of the other 2 colleges were very excited to hear that Thomas was willing to withdraw from the competition, they found it difficult to say it out loud. "I'm afraid that if Thomas still chooses to withdraw from the competition, the pressure faced by their 2 colleges after the game will be far more than just losing the game. And as everyone knows, Thomas is the successor of the Saints. If this incident angers Thomas, once the Saints retaliate, the consequences will be unbearable for them." "Ha ha ha ha, Mr. Black, you are such a joker. Since the Goblet of Fire has recognized you, you are certainly qualified to participate," Maxim said with a smile on his face. "Yes, we have to follow the rules," Karkaroff quickly agreed. "At this moment, the situation is pressing. No matter how reluctant the 2 colleges are, they can only swallow their anger and bear it." Dumbledore showed a satisfied expression when he saw this, and nodded slightly to show his agreement. Then he pretended to be a little embarrassed and said, "Since this is the Goblet of Fire's approval, we should respect and follow it." Chapter 120. "My lord, there is a witch outside who wants to invite you to meet her. She claims to be a reporter from the Daily Prophet." Theodore stood straight and spoke respectfully. Thomas sat on the sofa with a cup of black tea in his hand. After taking a sip, he answered nonchalantly. Send her away, and tell her how to write the report. If she doesn't understand what I mean, well, we have people in the Daily Prophet, you know what to do. Yes, sir. Theodore gave a standard bow and then turned and left the room. As soon as the door opened, the reporters waiting outside rushed in impatiently. How is it? Is Mr. Black willing to be interviewed by me? Rita's face was full of excitement and anticipation, with a gleam in her eyes. She had already thought about how to exaggerate and rewrite Thomas's remarks. After all, the man in front of her was the most famous figure in the global magic world. As long as I could get a few words from him and polish them skillfully, it would surely cause a sensation, and I would surely become famous. Thomas Blake, this name seems to have a kind of magic that makes people fall in love with him and stand in awe. His every move touches the nerves of countless people and becomes the focus of everyone's attention. All of this is undoubtedly a great opportunity for Rita, a reporter. My lord is not available to see you. Theodore said expressionlessly, his voice cold and without a trace of emotion. What? How is this possible? I am the most famous editor of the Daily Prophet. Are you mistaken? Rita frowned, her face full of dissatisfaction and doubt. Theodore glanced at her, his eyes revealing obvious impatience. In his eyes, this self-righteous female reporter was too arrogant. Your Excellency is busy with daily affairs, how can a small newspaper editor meet her whenever he wants? As for whether to meet her or not, it is entirely up to your Excellency's own wishes. What I said is the truth. Your Excellency is indeed busy. Theodore's tone became increasingly cold, as if saying one more word to Rita was a torture. Are you sure? Rita was really angry. She stared at Theodore with wide eyes. As the most authoritative reporter in the history of the Daily Prophet, she had never been treated like this. An ignorant kid dared to refuse her request. She secretly made up her mind to severely criticize Thomas's rude behavior in the report. However, Rita never expected that her seemingly ordinary behavior would bring her fatal disaster. At this moment, Theodore had already regarded Rita as a person who was doomed to die. In his eyes, anyone who dared to despise and offend adults should not live in this world. The next morning, the sun shone through the window onto the floor, creating patches of light and shadow. The Daily Prophet was delivered to every corner as usual, and people picked up the newspapers to read the latest news. However, today's headline surprised everyone. The famous journalist Rita Skeeter was unfortunately killed on her way back from interviewing the contestants of the Hogwarts Goblet of Fire. This news was like a bombshell, shocking the entire wizarding world. The Daily Prophet expressed its deep regret for the passing of this brave and sincere witch. For a time, people were talking about this incident, and all kinds of speculations and rumors were heard. Daphne sat in the corner of the Fool's Lounge, holding the Daily Prophet in her hand, frowning as she read the report. When she read the description of Rita Skeeter, she couldn't help but complain in a low voice. You deserve it. Harley next to her also echoed. That's right. I saw her write in the record before that the 12-year-old boy was actually dressed as a girl. Is this a distortion of the mind or a degeneration of personality? There was also something about her eyes wandering with ghosts of the past. These made-up words are simply slander against others. Although their voices were not loud, they were clearly heard in the quiet lounge. When the other fatui heard their words, they all agreed and joined the ranks of those who condemned the unscrupulous reporters. For a moment, the entire lounge was filled with angry accusations. At this moment, in a hidden space in Hogwarts, two figures stood facing each other. One of them asked Mr. Black, I wonder if you invited me here because of something important. There was a tense atmosphere in the air, as if a storm was about to come. Of course, there are some very important and vital matters, for example, matters related to your evil, terrible, and infamous master, Voldemort. Before he finished speaking, he heard an angry shout. Expelliarmus! Karkaroff was shocked when he saw this, and he reached for the wand at his waist, but it was too late. Thomas moved as fast as lightning and cast a magic spell first. In an instant, a powerful dark force gushed out from the top of the wand in Thomas's hand, turning into a dark beam of light, shooting straight towards Karkaroff. Karkaroff had no time to react before his wand was hit by the mysterious black light and instantly flew out of his hand and fell into the grass in the distance. Ah! Karkaroff screamed, his face full of shock and anger. Thomas Black, how dare you lay hands on me? Aren't you afraid of being reprimanded by Headmaster Dumbledore? Facing Karkaroff's questioning and rebuke, Thomas seemed calm and fearless. He smiled and spoke softly. No, 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 Mr. Karkaroff, please don't get excited. I firmly believe that my beloved Godfather will be able to understand my behavior at this moment. After all, a Death Eater dared to lure me to this deserted place and tried to attack me with a wand. And everything I did was just out of the instinct of self-preservation. What's wrong with it? Just as Thomas finished speaking, something strange happened. A dazzling golden light suddenly lit up, and then a huge python with wings on its back suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The giant python was huge, as majestic as a small hill. Its huge eyes were like two flaming gems, staring at Karkaroff closely, emitting a frightening aura. Now, we can talk calmly, Master Karkaroff. Thomas said calmly with a smile on his face. Chapter 121. Of course. Lord Black. Karkaroff nodded and spoke, with a flattering smile on his face. He looked very different from the majestic appearance he had as the headmaster of Durmstrang in the Hogwarts Hall. At this moment, he looked more like a lowly servant. Thomas looked at Karkaroff's flattering expression, and the corners of his mouth could not help but slightly rise. He secretly sighed in his heart, Karkaroff is really a complete fence-sitter. When Voldemort was alive, he was loyal to him and was willing to be a hateful Death Eater. After Voldemort's death, he was able to quickly change his role and return to the image of the lofty and majestic headmaster of Durmstrang. However, now when facing Thomas Black, he has become so servile again, just like a dog trying hard to please his master. Such people have completely lost the most basic dignity and backbone of being a human being, and can be said to be shameless. Okay, stop talking nonsense and tell me the task that Voldemort has assigned to you. Thomas said coldly. No. No, Master Black, if I tell you, the master will notice it immediately. Karkaroff looked embarrassed. As he spoke, he rolled up his sleeves, revealing the black magic mark on his arm. If you don't tell the truth, then this is your death. I'll give you a chance to make your own decision. Thomas spoke expressionlessly, his tone so cold that it seemed to freeze people into ice. Kukulkan, who was standing nearby, echoed the words in perfect harmony, roaring loudly. This terrifying roar frightened Karkaroff so much that his legs went weak and he began to tremble uncontrollably. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Lord Black, please have mercy on me and don't hurt me. Karkaroff pleaded in horror. At that moment, an unprecedented breath of death came over him, and he clearly realized that if he continued to be stubborn, he might really lose his life. After all, he was now the headmaster of Durmstrang, and a well-known and respected figure in the entire wizarding world. He really didn't want to lose his life in such an inexplicable way. Master, no, it should be Lord Voldemort. He is in a very bad condition right now. He is extremely weak. Karkaroff replied tremblingly, his voice full of fear and awe. He has not yet been completely resurrected, so this time I was sent to sneak into Hogwarts to find a way to get the key item required for the resurrection ceremony, the blood of the enemy. Karkaroff spilled all he knew. Only by gathering the blood of his enemies, the bones of his loved ones, and fresh flesh and blood sacrifices can Voldemort be resurrected with full blood. After Karkaroff finished his last sentence tremblingly, he collapsed to the ground as if relieved of a heavy burden, looking extremely embarrassed. Thomas listened carefully to Karkaroff's narration, a look of satisfaction appeared on his face, and he nodded slightly in approval. At this moment, the plot has not deviated from the original work. According to common sense, the most likely time for Voldemort to take action should be at the critical moment of the final. Just as Thomas was about to turn around and leave, suddenly, Karkaroff let out a series of extremely shrill howls, his body twitched uncontrollably, white foam came out of his mouth, and wisps of black air lingered around him. Thomas knew that Voldemort must have learned of Karkaroff's recent leak and was punishing him severely through the dark mark. However, Thomas did not care about this, because Voldemort was eager to return to his peak form anyway, and one of the necessary conditions to achieve this goal was to obtain the blood of his enemies. Even though he knew his plan had been exposed, Voldemort would never give up his attempt to take Harry's blood. Anyway, for Thomas, all he had to do was wait patiently. At the same time, he could clearly see that the task progress bar on the system panel was close to completion. He looked forward with great joy to the generous rewards that the system would bestow. At the same time, in another corner, Voldemort curled up in his seat with a gloomy look on his face, emitting a chilling aura. Damn it! How dare this BD expose my conspiracy? Voldemort roared in rage, his voice deafening. Little Barty at the side looked puzzled and asked cautiously. Master, what happened to make you so angry? Karkaroff, the traitor, leaked the secrets of my physical weakness and the items needed for my resurrection to Thomas Black. Voldemort said through gritted teeth. Fortunately, the remains of my relatives are in my hands, so I don't have to worry about the flesh and blood sacrifices. But there is only one thing that worries me, the blood of my enemies. It is well known throughout the wizarding world that Harry Potter was the boy who escaped death from my wand and miraculously rebounded my curse, killing me. How could the Black family kid not know the whole story? I'm sure he would take extra care of Harry Potter and keep him under close watch. This will surely become a huge and insurmountable obstacle on my road to rebirth. Voldemort's eyes were filled with resentment and Master, as long as you give the order, no matter what kind of obstacles there are, I will clear them for you. A crazy-looking witch with hair like black seaweed spoke up. This person is Voldemort's sharpest blade, Bella. Don't worry, my servant. It's not time yet. Voldemort said softly. Everyone just thought that Voldemort was unwilling to accept it and didn't say anything more. At this moment, only a hint of ruthlessness flashed across Voldemort's deep eyes, as if hiding endless darkness and conspiracy. He thought to himself. The time has come. Those chess pieces that have been hidden for many years and have been carefully cultivated can finally start to move. A sinister sneer sounded, like the whisper of a devil. Oh, my dear Headmaster Dumbledore. How satisfying will your face be when you know that the person closest to you is actually my loyal servant? The scene shifts to the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, where the atmosphere is tense and solemn. That despicable guy actually dared to try to hurt Harley. I'm going to kill him right now. Snape roared in rage, his voice deafening. Remain calm, Severus. This is not the time to act rashly. Please take my advice and be patient. Dumbledore spoke in a calm tone, and held Snape's arms tightly with both hands, preventing him from rushing out the door. However, Snape was already so overwhelmed with anger that he was unable to calm his inner resentment. Hold on? How can I hold back? As long as I am here to protect her, no one can touch Harley's hair. His voice was full of firmness and determination, and he seemed ready to fight at any time. Chapter 122. Suddenly, the heavy door of the principal's office was pushed open without any warning, and two figures, one old and one young, appeared at the door like ghosts. Wow! Are Grandpa Dumbledore and Uncle Snape playing some interesting game? The little girl blinked her big, lively eyes and asked with curiosity and anticipation. It looks like a lot of fun. Can Iris join in? As she spoke, she couldn't help rubbing her hands, her face filled with irrepressible excitement. Professor McGonagall shook his head helplessly upon seeing this. He then took out a handful of mints from his pocket and handed them to Elise, stroking her hair gently. Be good, Elise. Godmother, Grandpa Dumbledore and Uncle Snape have important matters to discuss. Why don't you go play with Brother Thomas first? Okay. Oh. That's great, I can go play with Daddy now. Iris danced with joy and cheered non-stop, then ran out like a happy little bird. Looking at Iris's cheerful back as she walked away, Professor McGonagall could only sigh helplessly. This child is always so impetuous and reckless. He will probably become a brave and fearless Gryffindor when he grows up. Minerva, Minerva! Don't just stand there in a daze, come and help me stop Severus, I can't hold on any longer. Dumbledore's slightly anxious voice brought Professor McGonagall back to reality. Just as Professor McGonagall was about to move forward to help, a figure suddenly flashed in the headmaster's office and appeared behind Dumbledore like a ghost. Albus, it seems that you really can't do it without my help. Grindelwald's voice was still as gentle as ever, but it carried a hint of irresistible majesty. Many times, it is not always women who can lend you a hand. Grindelwald has proved this to everyone with his actions. Men can also be so delicate and considerate. Now is not the time to talk about this, Gale. We must stop Severus. The more critical the moment, the more calm we must be. Dumbledore said with forced calmness. Well, that's a good point, Albus. Beg me. The corners of Grindelwald's mouth rose slightly, revealing a barely perceptible smile. Ah! Dumbledore obviously did not expect Grindelwald to make such a request, and was a little at a loss for a moment. Please me and I'll help you. Grindelwald repeated what he had just said, and this time he deliberately slowed down his speech, making each word extremely clear. Gale, do you really have to do this in the principal's office? Dumbledore's face gradually turned red, and he lowered his head, seeming to be a little embarrassed to speak. That's right, Albus. Beg me and I'll help you. Grindelwald was not moved at all and still insisted on his position. He knew that although his old friend was very wise, he was sometimes too stubborn and unwilling to give in easily. And now was the time for him to put down his status. The murals that had been quietly hanging on the walls of the principal's office now seemed to be given life and began to move restlessly. They stared with wide eyes, curiously staring at what was happening below, some even whispering to each other. And several female principals laughed unabashedly, seeming to be full of interest in the scene before them. Snape, who was trying to resist, suddenly stopped moving as if he was cast under a spell. He didn't know why he did this. Maybe he just didn't want to get involved in this play led by two weird old men. Professor McGonagall, who was standing outside the door, had an ant-like friendly smile on her face. She signaled Snape with her eyes from time to time to keep struggling. After all, such a wonderful show could not be seen at any time. However, Snape did not appreciate it. He rolled his eyes helplessly, and finally succumbed to Professor McGonagall's majesty and had to continue pretending to struggle. In fact, Snape knew very well that the reason he chose to obey was entirely because he had received a lot of care and help from this professor during his student days. Faced with this situation, he could only swallow his bitterness in silence, he had no way to express it. Grindelwald watched all this with a satisfied look on his face, and nodded slightly to Professor McGonagall to show his approval. Seeing this, Professor McGonagall also responded with a reassuring look. Dumbledore, who had just breathed a sigh of relief and thought he would finally avoid embarrassing himself in front of the portraits of successive deans and numerous professors, suddenly noticed that Snape, who had originally calmed down and stopped struggling, became restless again. Faced with such a situation, Dumbledore could only temporarily attribute the series of events to the fact that Snape was just taking a short break because he was too tired. However, at this moment, his old bones really didn't have the extra strength to drag Snape. After all, he was a magician, not a strong warrior. Gale, please help me. As Dumbledore blurted out these words, his wrinkled old face instantly turned red as if he had just drunk 10 bottles of fire whiskey. The portraits of past principals hanging on the wall all cheered and applauded at the same time. They thought to themselves, there is no doubt that the scene being played out before their eyes must be one of the most wonderful scenes in hundreds of years. As you wish, Albus. Grindelwald responded softly, then immediately pulled out his wand from his bosom and pointed it at Snape, chanting a spell, fainted. A dazzling blue light suddenly shot out from the tip of the wand in Grindelwald's hand, as fast as lightning, and hit Snape directly. With a clear and loud thump sound, Snape fell to the ground defenselessly, as if he was knocked down by an invisible huge force. In the moment before he lost consciousness, Snape felt an unprecedented sense of relief and liberation. Over the years, working with those old naughty boys had exhausted him, but now, everything was over. Finally, he no longer had to endure their endless farces and nonsense, and could get rid of all these constraints and gain true freedom. The air was filled with the breath of freedom, which made him intoxicated. He couldn't help but breathe deeply, huff, huff, huff. For Snape, this moment was as wonderful as being reborn. Chapter 123. In the meeting room of the Fatui, Malfoy shouted with a happy face and excitement. Cousin, you can never imagine what I just witnessed. 5 dragons of different shapes came to the outside of Hogwarts Castle, and one of them was Norbert. He became more and more excited as he spoke, and his voice couldn't help but rise an octave. I bet that was it. When it noticed me, it was so excited that it was breathing out flames, as if it was thanking me for bringing it back to its family. After saying this, Malfoy's face was filled with pride and satisfaction. Upon hearing the news, Harry and Hermione could not hold back their excitement and stood up from their seats. They could not wait to find out what was going on. After all, Norbert was a little guy who was born right under their noses. Is this true, Malfoy? Harry asked with eyes wide open, eyes full of anticipation. Hermione, who was standing by, couldn't hide her excitement and echoed. Let's go out and take a look. It's absolutely true. When have I ever lied to you? Malfoy answered confidently, with a look of confidence on his face. However, Theodore, who was sitting next to him, looked at the complacent Malfoy and felt a little unhappy. He curled his lips in disdain and thought. It's just a few fire dragons, what's the big deal? For a truly powerful person, these are just existences that can be easily wiped out. But it seems that the trophy of this Triwizard tournament belongs to that adult. Thinking of this, Theodore could not hide his excitement. Harley, who was about to go out, stopped. She knew her own strength, and if she met a fire dragon, she would be eliminated. She was not discouraged. She had never intended to sign up in the first place, and she didn't know why her name appeared in the Goblet of Fire. But it's no big deal anyway. With Thomas taking action, Hogwarts has already secured victory. Late at night, everything was quiet, and the moonlight poured through the window into the gloomy and ancient common room of Slytherin College. The room was quiet, with only the occasional crackling of the fire, but at this moment, the originally peaceful fireplace suddenly caught fire, and the flames licked the wall, as if to devour the entire room. In the firelight, a blurry face gradually emerged. The face revealed confusion and surprise, and muttered to itself. "Hey, where is this? It doesn't look like the Gryffindor common room. This lush green hue makes it more like a Slytherin place. There must be something wrong with my magic. I need to try again." Just as Sirius was about to cast the spell again, his eyes suddenly went dark, and a figure in a huge black robe appeared in front of him like a ghost. The two looked at each other and couldn't help but gasp. "Snape. Sirius. It's true that enemies meet in a narrow road. When enemies meet, they are especially jealous of each other. Why are you here?" Sirius asked with wide eyes and an angry face. "I am the head of Slytherin. If I'm not here, where else can I go?" Snape responded coldly, his eyes gleaming with cunning and defiance. "You, on the other hand, are extremely suspicious. As a wanted criminal, you actually have the guts to show up in Hogwarts openly," Snape said viciously with a fierce look on his face. When Sirius heard this, he suddenly felt dissatisfied and quickly retorted. "You are the real wanted criminal. Don't you read the newspapers on weekdays? Didn't you see that the Ministry of Magic has already withdrawn the charges against me? I am a good person with a clean record. Forget it. It's useless to waste time talking to someone like you. I'd better go find Harry as soon as possible." After that, Sirius prepared to cast magic to transfer. "Wait. What are you looking for, Harley?" Snape said anxiously. Sirius saw Snape's eagerness and was puzzled. He was confused for a moment. After all, he was familiar with Harry, and the boy was a replica of James, except for his eyes. Normally, Snape should be extremely disgusted with Harry, but why was he so concerned about him now? "What's your business if I look for Harry?" Sirius said unhappily. "Humph, don't even think about getting close to Harley. She's sleeping soundly right now." Snape refused righteously. "Falling asleep? Then just wake him up. I'm sure he will be very happy to see his beloved godfather again." Sirius insisted on his own opinion. Sirius said indifferently, with a mean look on his face. "You dare!" Snape's voice had a hint of anger in it. "What am I afraid of?" Sirius's face was full of pride. "I'm just a spirit now, can you still hurt me?" "Ha ha 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 ha." Just as Snape was about to yell at Sirius for his shamelessness, a flash of inspiration suddenly struck his mind. "Since you prefer to cling to the flames so much," Snape raised the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing a sly smile, "then I will help you put out the fire." Before he finished speaking, Snape waved his wand and chanted a spell, clear as spring water. In an instant, a huge stream of water gushed out from the top of the wand and rushed straight towards the fire. At this moment, Thomas, who was about to cross the lounge hall to the room of requirement to work hard on upgrading, happened to witness this scene and couldn't help but gasp. He never expected that Dean Snape, who usually had a cold and indifferent face, as if everyone owed him a huge sum of money, would be so fancy in private. What was even more surprising was that the amount of water looked quite spectacular. However, as an outstanding Slytherin student, Thomas knew that less trouble is worse than more trouble, so he decisively chose to leave quietly. Chapter 124. The first round of the Three-Strong Cup finally kicked off under the attention of everyone. At this moment, the huge circular arena was packed with people, and every seat was occupied. Not only were there Hogwarts students from the school, but also students from the other two major colleges who came specially to watch the ceremony and cheer. In the huge preparation tent, except for Thomas who was calm and composed, every other contestant had a look of deep uneasiness and anxiety in his eyes. The reason was that just now, they saw with their own eyes that the enemy they were about to face was actually 5 huge and menacing fire dragons. These fire dragons came from all over the world and were of different species. The only task before them is to find a way to snatch the precious dragon eggs back from the mouths of these extremely ferocious fire dragons. Just when everyone was worried, the door curtain of the tent was suddenly lifted, and then an old man in a black suit carrying a small cloth bag walked in. This uninvited guest was none other than the famous Old Batty. Adult. Old Batty bowed respectfully to Thomas and greeted him. However, in the face of Old Batty's humble and polite attitude, Thomas simply nodded his head nonchalantly in response. After Old Batty finished greeting Thomas, he turned around, glanced at the other people present, and shouted loudly. "Everyone come over here and draw your corresponding fire dragon in order." "Thomas, don't you smoke?" Furong turned her head and looked at Thomas, who was sitting on the recliner, and asked curiously. Thomas shook his head slightly, a faint smile on his face. "It doesn't make much difference whether I smoke or not. To me, no matter which dragon it is, they are all the same in my eyes." His tone was relaxed and casual, as if the giant dragon that was causing everyone headaches was just an insignificant existence that could be easily wiped out in his eyes. In fact, this was indeed the case. Just before Thomas was about to leave, Dumbledore came to him and told him to save a dragon's life on the field today. Although Thomas was puzzled as to why the man who invented many ways to use fire dragons asked him to save a dragon in particular, he finally agreed since the other party came to visit him in person. The 4 of them looked at each other, and each of them showed a helpless smile on their faces. That's right, facing such a ferocious and terrifying fire dragon, they had to be extremely cautious, as they could be buried in the sea of fire if they were not careful. However, no matter how powerful these fire dragons were, in Thomas's eyes, they were just slightly larger lizards that could breathe fire. "I'll go first," Furong said softly, her eyes firm and confident. She gently reached into the bag and carefully took out a green mini dragon. "Welsh green dragon!" Old Batty on the side shouted in surprise. Then, Crumb shouted without showing any weakness. "I'm next." After saying that, he quickly reached into his pocket, grabbed something with force, and pulled out a red mini dragon. The celestial fireball. Harry and Cedric looked at each other, both looking a little nervous. At this moment, Cedric took a deep breath and broke the silence. "I'll go first." His voice was gentle and firm, as if telling himself that he must do his best. Because he knew in his heart that although the hope of winning the championship was slim, he must not give up easily, and must go all out to leave himself no regrets. Swedish short-nosed dragon. There was silence as Cedric showed off the little dragon he had caught. "Come on." Cedric turned around and encouraged Harley with a smile. Harley felt his support and gained more courage. "Come on." Harley gritted her teeth and finally mustered up the courage to put her hand into the bag. Suddenly, she screamed, "Ah, it bit me." When everyone looked closely, they saw a little brown dragon crawling out of the bag, slowly climbing onto Harry's palm, and opening its mouth to let out a low roar. "Hungarian horntail, I must say, young lady, you have a bit of bad luck." Old Batty shook his head regretfully. "Sir, there is only one left, a black dragon from the Heshadillas Islands. This fire dragon is the most violent and ferocious of the 5 fire dragons. But with your strength, it is easy to solve these problems." Old Batty said in an excited tone. "I don't really care. I just hope this fire dragon won't let me down." Thomas acted very calm and casual. Half an hour later, accompanied by deafening cheers from outside the stadium, Thomas stood up, stretched his muscles, and then slowly walked out of his seat. When the people outside the venue saw Thomas appear, they instantly became excited and burst into warm cheers like surging waves. "Glory to Slytherin! Glory to Black! Glory to Hogwarts! Long live Lord Black! Hogwarts will win!" Thomas walked towards the field with firm steps, and suddenly, an extremely huge black dragon appeared before his eyes. The dragon is huge, nearly 10 meters long, covered with shiny black scales, as hard as ebony. It also has a row of dorsal fins on its back that are not too deep but extremely sharp, like razors. The black dragon opened its eyes wide, which were as dazzling as purple gemstones, and stared at Thomas fiercely, with low roars coming from its mouth from time to time, as if it was going to pounce forward and bite him in the next second. "Snake Spirit, come out and show your debut." As soon as Thomas finished speaking, the magic stone embedded in the top of the magic wand in his hand suddenly emitted a brilliant red light. In the blink of an eye, the red light gathered into a terrifying snake monster that was 10 meters long and extremely huge in size. The snake monster held its head high and chest puffed out, baring its fangs and claws as it roared at the fire dragon in front of it. Oh my god, it's a basilisk. That's not right. Why does it feel like it's not a physical entity? Is it because of that magic wand? At this moment, the experienced spectators on the sidelines immediately saw through the true face of the snake spirit. However, for them, this was actually not important. Thomas summoned this ferocious black dragon this time in order to use it to test how strong the snake spirit was. In an instant, the two huge monsters collided with each other without any warning, and a thrilling and fierce fight began. Chapter 125. While the two giants were fighting fiercely, Thomas walked slowly towards the golden egg. He walked slowly, as if everything around him had nothing to do with him. Finally, he came to the golden egg and sat down without hesitation. Yes, Thomas sat down so carelessly. Even though the golden egg for passing the level was right before his eyes, he didn't seem to have any intention of reaching out to take it. The other 4 contestants had to go through untold hardships and engage in a thrilling battle of wits with the ferocious fire dragon before they successfully won the golden egg, but for Thomas, it became as relaxing as a leisurely walk after dinner. When the black dragon noticed that Thomas was gradually approaching the golden egg, it immediately let out a deafening roar, completely ignoring the serious injuries on its body, struggled hard to break free from the entanglement of the basilisk, and flapped its huge wings to pounce on Thomas. Fire! Fire! Suddenly, a clear and loud sound pierced the sky. In an instant, a blazing flame as black as ink spread rapidly, instantly engulfing the entire competition venue. Then, a mighty dragon formed by the gathering of fire leaped into the air, rushed straight towards the black dragon with the force of thunder, and collided fiercely with it. Dumbledore was stunned when he saw this shocking scene. Similar scenes from many years ago came to his mind, but this time, the scene was more thrilling and crazy. Grindelwald, who was watching everything happening, couldn't help but sigh, time is so cruel. At this moment, he deeply felt the passage of time and felt that he was really old. Memories gradually emerged in his mind, and the image of himself in middle age gradually overlapped with that of Thomas. This time, he firmly believed that he would succeed, and the successor he chose would realize his long-cherished wish and bring long-lost unity to the entire wizarding world. Compared to his past self, Thomas is now younger, more capable, and more powerful. More importantly, he has established a huge force of his own. Although Grindelwald has already handed over the saints to Thomas, John still reports the latest situation to him from time to time. Seeing the saints' army fully entering the Eagle Country wizard world, how could Grindelwald not understand Thomas's intentions? It might not be long before a huge turmoil that could shake the foundation of the global wizard world would suddenly come like a storm. The winner is the king and the loser is the villain, that's all. Perhaps if Grindelwald had insisted, he would still have succeeded, but he does not regret living in the tower for so many years. At least now he can stand with his beloved. Thomas held his head high and looked directly at Grindelwald, who was watching the battle from the sidelines. Their eyes met, sparks flying in the air. Thomas didn't care about the blood, violence, or death toll, he only cared about the final result. Because all the sacrifices and efforts are only for the pursuit of the supreme and greater interests. With a shrill and tragic wail, the huge fire dragon fell to the ground like a mountain, splashing dust all over the sky. The red and hot dragon blood gushed out of its body like a fountain, flowing freely on the black flames, and then quickly evaporated. Snape in the stands felt very annoyed. You know, dragon's blood is one of the important props in potions, and it is very scarce. Many times, even if you have money, it is difficult to buy it. It is just wasted in vain, making Snape in the stands want to take the bottle up on stage to start receiving it. It's over. Thomas waved his wand gently, and the black flames and the dragon burning on the field instantly dissipated into the air, and the snake spirit also returned to the Philosopher's Stone. Because Thomas was keenly aware that the life force of the black dragon in front of him had become extremely weak. If it continued like this, it would most likely die. Thomas thought to himself. We must not let this happen. I, Thomas, have always been a man of my words and a man of my promises. Thomas thought so while casting a recovery spell on the dying black dragon. At this moment, the entire venue fell into a dead silence, and time seemed to have frozen. No one spoke, and even the sound of breathing could be heard clearly. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Thomas, waiting for his next move. Finally, Thomas walked towards the dragon's nest with a firm step. When he reached out and picked up the dragon egg shining with golden light, it was as if he touched a mysterious switch, which instantly triggered an earth-shaking change. In an instant, the whole audience erupted in thunderous cheers. The sound was as loud as thunder, one wave after another, resounding through the sky. At this moment, the crown of victory belongs to Slytherin House. At this moment, the glory of the Black family will always be above everyone else. Although this was only the first stage of the competition, in the eyes of the audience, this fierce battle had already entered the exciting moment of the final to win the championship. After all, even many senior professors may not be able to easily display such a majestic and large-scale magical power. However, young Thomas did it, and he did it so well. You know, Thomas is still young at this time, and there are infinite possibilities waiting for him to explore and discover in the future. For most people, their dream goal may be to reach the pinnacle of life, but for Thomas, this is just a new starting point. The road ahead is still long, full of unknowns and challenges, and Thomas will surely create more glorious legends of his own. Thomas returned to the dormitory, and without even glancing at the golden dragon egg in his hand, he threw it into a corner of the room like trash. Then, he collapsed heavily on the bed. To others, dragon eggs might be a big trouble that causes endless headaches, but to Thomas, haha, sorry, I'm the man who holds the script. What really upset Thomas was the upcoming Yule Ball, the grand social celebration at Hogwarts, when many witches and wizards in love would offer their love to the one they liked. This phenomenon is quite normal. After all, the social circle of the entire wizarding world is so small that most wizards would choose to digest their own products internally and sell them by themselves. Moreover, many couples who graduated from Hogwarts basically entered the marriage hall hand in hand right after they stepped out of the school gate. So it is safe to say that, from entering the campus to tying the knot, Hogwarts witnessed the first half of your emotional life. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.